"Jimin, don't go in there!" Taeyoung's voice echoed through the emergency room hallway, but Jimin had already pushed the door open. What he saw made him stop breathing for a second. JUNGKOOK, lying on the hospital bed with an IV attached to his arm, suddenly opened his eyes and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Get out! Get out of here, Jimin!" The entire ER fell silent. Doctors turned around, nurses froze. Jimin stood there, shocked, unable to move. But what happened only minutes later made every single person in that hospital question everything they thought they knew. Before we continue, I want to know your opinion. If someone you cared about suddenly screamed at you during their worst moment, would you stay or walk away? And before we start this story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. Nobody in that hospital understood why JUNGKOOK reacted that way. Not RM, not Jin, not Suga, not J-Hope, not even Taeyang, who had been beside him for hours. Because only JUNGKOOK knew the real reason he wanted JIMIN out of that room. And the truth was far more dangerous than anyone imagined. What looked like anger was actually fear. What sounded like rejection was actually protection. And hidden behind JUNGKOOK's desperate scream was a secret that had been buried for months. A secret involving JIMIN, the other BTS members, and a decision that could destroy their relationship forever. The worst part? JIMIN was about to discover that the accident that brought JUNGKOOK to the ER wasn't an accident at all. JIMIN remained frozen at the doorway long after JUNGKOOK's voice stopped echoing through the emergency room. The silence that followed felt heavier than the scream itself. For several seconds, nobody moved. The doctors exchanged confused looks. A nurse slowly lowered the clipboard in her hands. RM stepped forward first, trying to understand what had just happened. "JUNGKOOK," he said carefully, "what are you doing?" But JUNGKOOK wasn't looking at RM. His eyes stayed locked on JIMIN. There was something strange in them. Fear, panic, desperation. Emotions that didn't match the anger in his voice. "I said, get out," JUNGKOOK repeated, his voice shaking this time. "Leave!" JIMIN felt his chest tighten. During all the years they had known each other, JUNGKOOK had never looked at him like this. Not even during their worst arguments. Not even during moments when they couldn't stand being in the same room together. This was different. This felt personal. "Why?" JIMIN finally asked. The question came out quieter than he expected. JUNGKOOK immediately looked away. That single movement made JIMIN's stomach drop, because suddenly he realized something. JUNGKOOK wasn't angry at him. JUNGKOOK was hiding something from him. And that realization hurt far more than the shouting. Taeyang noticed it too. He glanced between them, trying to piece together what wasn't being said. Earlier that evening, when the call came informing them that JUNGKOOK had collapsed, everyone had rushed to the hospital together. JIMIN had been the first person to arrive after Taeyang. He had spent hours waiting outside the emergency treatment room, hours worrying, hours asking doctors for updates, hours refusing to leave. Yet the moment JUNGKOOK woke up, he demanded that JIMIN disappear. Nothing about it made sense. "JUNGKOOK," said Jin softly, "JIMIN has been here the entire night." JUNGKOOK clenched his jaw. Then he should leave first. Another uncomfortable silence followed. JIMIN felt dozens of eyes turning toward him. Nurses, doctors, his members. Everyone was waiting to see what he would do. For a moment, pride told him to walk away. If JUNGKOOK wanted him gone, then fine, he would leave. But something deep inside him refused to move. Because JUNGKOOK's voice wasn't convincing. His eyes weren't convincing. The fear hidden behind them was impossible to ignore. "No," JIMIN said. The word surprised even him. JUNGKOOK immediately looked back at him. "What?" "I'm not leaving." JUNGKOOK's face turned pale. Genuine panic flashed across his expression. "JIMIN, tell me why." The room suddenly felt smaller. The air became heavier. JIMIN took one step forward. "Tell me why you're doing this." Jungkook's breathing became uneven. His fingers tightened around the hospital blanket. For a second, it looked like he was about to say something important, something huge. But before the words could leave his mouth, a doctor suddenly entered the room carrying a tablet. "Excuse me," the doctor interrupted. "We need to speak with the family members regarding the patient's test results." Everyone's attention shifted immediately. Jungkook looked relieved, too relieved. JIMIN noticed, and that only increased his suspicion. The doctor continued speaking. The patient experienced severe exhaustion combined with elevated stress markers. There are also signs that he ignored symptoms for quite some time. RM frowned. Ignored symptoms? Weeks, possibly months. The doctor's answer shocked everyone. J-Hope looked confused. Months? Based on what we're seeing, yes. JIMIN slowly turned toward Jungkook. Months? He repeated. Jungkook stayed silent. JIMIN felt anger beginning to replace his confusion. Not because Jungkook had hidden health problems, but because nobody had known. Not RM, not Jin, not Suga, not him. Especially not him. "You've been sick for months?" JIMIN asked. Jungkook refused to answer. That silence hurt more than any explanation could have. Because JIMIN suddenly realized there had been signs, small signs, missed signs. Jungkook canceling meals, Jungkook leaving practice early, Jungkook becoming distant, Jungkook ignoring messages. Every strange behavior now seemed connected, and yet he had never told anyone. Why? Before JIMIN could ask another question, the doctor's expression changed. "There's one more thing." The room became quiet again. "When Jungkook was brought in tonight, we found evidence that he had recently suffered another injury." RM looked confused. "Another injury?" The doctor nodded. "One that appears to have happened several days ago." This time, even Jungkook looked alarmed. "Wait," he said immediately, "you weren't supposed to mention that." Everyone turned toward him. JIMIN's heartbeat quickened. Another injury? What injury? Why was Jungkook trying to hide it? And most importantly, from whom? The moment Jungkook tried to stop the doctor, everyone in the room knew something was wrong. Not ordinary wrong, serious wrong. The kind of wrong that had been hidden for a long time. The doctor's eyes moved from Jungkook to the other BTS members. He clearly hadn't expected that reaction. "I'm sorry," the doctor said carefully. "Was that information not shared with the others?" Nobody answered, because the answer was obvious. RM's expression hardened immediately. Jin crossed his arms. Suga stared directly at Jungkook without blinking. Taeyoung slowly looked away, as if he was beginning to suspect something he didn't want to believe. JIMIN remained silent. He wasn't angry anymore, not yet. What he felt was worse, confusion, the kind that slowly turns into disappointment. "What injury?" RM finally asked. The doctor hesitated. "There was bruising along the shoulder and upper ribs. Based on the healing pattern, it happened several days ago." "Several days?" Jin repeated. "How many?" "Approximately 5 or 6. The room fell silent again. 5 or 6 days ago. Every member immediately started remembering their schedules for that week. Meetings, rehearsals, recordings, public appearances. Jungkook had attended all of them, smiling, acting normal, pretending nothing was wrong. J-Hope shook his head in disbelief. "You performed while injured?" Jungkook stared at the ceiling. "It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" Suga spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, but everyone knew that was a bad sign. "You collapsed." Jungkook didn't answer. "You ended up in the ER." Still nothing. "And you're calling it not a big deal?" Jungkook closed his eyes. The tension in the room became unbearable. JIMIN watched him carefully. There was something different about Jungkook tonight. Usually, when confronted, he would defend himself, argue, push back. But now, he looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. As if he had been carrying something far heavier than an injury. How did it happen? Taeyoung suddenly asked. Jungkook's eyes opened immediately, too quickly. That reaction alone was suspicious. I fell. Where? Outside. Outside where? Jungkook hesitated. A mistake. A tiny mistake, but everyone noticed it. Near the studio. Nobody believed him, not even for a second, because Jungkook was one of the most careful people they knew. A random fall severe enough to cause bruised ribs didn't match the story. RM could see it too. Which studio? He asked. Jungkook stayed silent. Jungkook? I don't remember. The lie landed heavily in the room. Even the doctor looked uncomfortable. JIMIN felt something twist in his chest, because he suddenly remembered something 6 nights earlier. A message, a very strange message, at nearly 3 in the morning. He'd been awake reviewing some work when his phone buzzed. The message came from Jungkook. It only contained 3 words. Are you awake? JIMIN replied almost immediately, but Jungkook never answered. The next morning, the message was deleted. At the time, JIMIN thought nothing of it. Now, it felt important. Very important. You're lying, JIMIN said quietly. Every head turned toward him. Jungkook's expression immediately changed. I'm not. Yes, you are. JIMIN, you're lying. The words came out sharper this time. And you've been lying for weeks. Jungkook looked away again. Another mistake. Another confirmation. JIMIN felt frustration building inside him, not because Jungkook had secrets, everyone had secrets, but because whatever this was had become serious enough to land him in a hospital bed. Why didn't you tell me? The question escaped before he could stop it. The room became strangely quiet, because everyone heard what he really meant. Not, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell me? Jungkook heard it too. His eyes slowly met JIMIN's. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then, Jungkook whispered something so quietly that only those closest heard it. I couldn't. JIMIN frowned. Couldn't? I couldn't. Why? Jungkook opened his mouth, then stopped. Whatever answer existed seemed trapped inside him. RM immediately noticed. Someone's involved. Jungkook froze. The reaction was instant, obvious, dangerous. Sude leaned forward slightly. There is someone. Jungkook's silence became confirmation. Jin exchanged a worried glance with RM. Taeyoung looked genuinely unsettled now, because this wasn't just a health issue anymore. Someone else was connected to it. Someone Jungkook was protecting, or someone he feared. The doctor quietly excused himself, sensing that this conversation was no longer medical. The moment the door closed behind him, RM spoke again. Who? Jungkook immediately shook his head. No. Who is it? No. Jungkook, drop it. The answer came faster than expected, sharper than expected. The room became tense again. JIMIN stared at him. There it was, the first real emotion of the night. Fear. Not fear for himself, fear for somebody else. Suddenly, JIMIN remembered another detail. 3 days ago, during rehearsal, Jungkook received a phone call. Whatever he heard on the other end completely changed his mood. He left the room immediately. 20 minutes later, he returned looking pale. When JIMIN asked if everything was okay, Jungkook smiled and said yes. Another lie. One of many. Who called you 3 days ago? JIMIN asked. Jungkook's eyes widened. The reaction lasted less than a second, but everyone saw it. Every member in the room saw it. And suddenly, nobody was looking at the hospital bed anymore. They were looking at the secret hidden behind it. Jungkook realized it too, because for the first time since waking up, genuine panic crossed his face. Then, his phone suddenly vibrated on the bedside table. Everyone looked toward it. The screen lit up. One incoming message. One name. One name that instantly drained all color from Jungkook's face. And the moment JIMIN saw that name, JIMIN realized the nightmare was far bigger than any of them had imagined. The room went completely silent the moment the phone screen lit up. Nobody expected a simple notification to change the atmosphere so dramatically, but it did. JUNGKOOK reacted before anyone else. He reached for the phone so quickly that the IV line attached to his arm pulled tight. A sharp pain crossed his face, but he ignored it. His only focus was the screen. That alone told everyone what they needed to know. Whatever name had appeared there mattered a lot. JIMIN caught a glimpse before JUNGKOOK turned the phone over. Just one glimpse, not enough to read the entire contact name clearly, but enough to recognize that it wasn't any of the members. It wasn't management either. The panic in JUNGKOOK's eyes grew worse. "Give me that," RM said calmly. "No." JUNGKOOK's answer came immediately. "JUNGKOOK, no." The firmness in his voice shocked everyone. Even Suga looked surprised. Usually, when RM stepped in, arguments cooled down. Not this time. JUNGKOOK looked ready to fight the entire room if necessary. JIMIN felt his frustration rising again. Every answer led to more questions. Every explanation revealed another secret. "Who is messaging you?" JIMIN asked. JUNGKOOK avoided eye contact. "Nobody." "Nobody?" Jin scoffed. "You're risking your IV line for nobody?" JUNGKOOK didn't respond. His silence said enough. Another vibration. The phone lit up again. This time, everyone saw it. Not the full message, just the preview. 3 words. "Call me now." Taeyoung frowned immediately. Why does that look like an emergency? JUNGKOOK grabbed the phone tighter. "It's nothing." Nobody believed him, not even for a second. The room felt smaller now, more dangerous, like everyone was standing on the edge of discovering something that couldn't be undone once revealed. JIMIN watched JUNGKOOK carefully. He knew him too well, knew the small changes in expression, knew when he was nervous, knew when he was angry, knew when he was scared. And right now, JUNGKOOK wasn't just scared, he looked trapped. "Did somebody hurt you?" JIMIN suddenly asked. The question escaped before he could stop it. Every head turned. JUNGKOOK froze, completely froze. The reaction lasted less than a second, but it was enough. RM noticed, Jin noticed, Suga noticed, Taeyoung noticed, everyone noticed. JIMIN's heart sank, because for the first time all night, nobody denied the possibility. "JUNGKOOK," RM said carefully, "did someone do this to you?" The younger man looked away. A terrible answer, the worst possible answer, because silence had become confirmation. J-Hope slowly sat down in a nearby chair. "You're serious," he whispered. "Someone actually hurt him." The realization spread through the room like ice. Suddenly, the bruises didn't seem accidental. The exhaustion didn't seem accidental. The secrecy didn't seem accidental. Everything connected. Everything pointed towards something much darker. JUNGKOOK squeezed his eyes shut. "Stop asking." "No!" RM's voice hardened. "Not anymore." "Young, not anymore." JUNGKOOK looked genuinely exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone who spent too long carrying a burden alone. JIMIN wanted to be angry, wanted to demand answers, wanted to yell. But seeing JUNGKOOK like this made something else take over. Concern. Real concern. Because underneath all the secrets, JUNGKOOK looked broken. Not injured, broken. Another vibration. The phone lit up again. This time, JUNGKOOK immediately muted it. Too late. JIMIN saw another preview. Not the entire sentence, just enough. "Don't tell them." Every muscle in JIMIN's body tensed. Don't tell them. Them, meaning the members, meaning whoever was sending these messages knew exactly where JUNGKOOK was, knew who was with him, knew what was happening right now. A chill ran through the room. "Who is that?" Taeyoung asked. JUNGKOOK didn't answer. "Who knows we're here?" RM added. Still nothing. "JUNGKOOK, stop! Answer us! Stop!" The shout echoed across the room. Everyone fell silent. JUNGKOOK lowered his head. His breathing had become uneven again. The monitor beside his bed began beeping faster. JIMIN immediately stepped forward without thinking. "Hey!" JUNGKOOK didn't look up. "Hey, calm down." Another few seconds passed. Then something unexpected happened. JUNGKOOK's hands started shaking, not a little, noticeably. The room's tension disappeared instantly. Whatever argument existed no longer mattered, because JUNGKOOK looked like he was on the verge of completely falling apart. Jin moved closer. Suga stood up. Even RM's expression softened. "JUNGKOOK," Jin said quietly, "look at me." Slowly, JUNGKOOK raised his head. His eyes were red. JIMIN felt his chest tighten. JUNGKOOK had always been strong in front of others, stubborn, independent, the type of person who carried pain silently. Seeing him like this felt wrong. "You're not alone," J-Hope said softly. "Whatever happened." JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly, a short, painful laugh. "You don't understand." Nobody liked that answer. "Then explain it," JIMIN replied. "Help us understand." JUNGKOOK stared at him for several seconds. The room waited. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Finally, JUNGKOOK opened his mouth. For one brief moment, it looked like he was ready to tell the truth, the entire truth. But before a single word could leave his lips, the hospital room door suddenly opened. A nurse rushed inside. Her face looked alarmed. "Which one of you is Park JIMIN?" Every eye immediately turned toward JIMIN. Confused, he raised his hand. "I am." The nurse swallowed hard. "There's someone downstairs asking for you." JIMIN frowned. "Who?" The nurse hesitated. Then she answered, and the moment the name left her mouth, JUNGKOOK's face turned completely white.
The room froze. Every pair of eyes shifted between the nurse and JUNGKOOK. JIMIN immediately noticed the change in JUNGKOOK's face. The color had disappeared completely. His hands tightened around the blanket. His breathing became uneven again. Whatever name the nurse had just said, JUNGKOOK recognized it instantly. And judging by his reaction, that was very bad news. "What?" JIMIN asked, unable to understand why everyone suddenly looked so tense. The nurse glanced around the room awkwardly. "The man downstairs said it's urgent. He specifically asked for Park JIMIN." Nobody spoke for a second. Then RM stepped forward. "Who exactly is he?" The nurse repeated the name. This time everyone heard it clearly. Nobody recognized it. Not RM, not Jin, not Suga, not J-Hope, not Taeyoung. It wasn't a manager. It wasn't staff. It wasn't someone connected to BTS. Yet JUNGKOOK looked like he had seen a ghost. JIMIN immediately turned toward him. "Do you know him?" JUNGKOOK didn't answer. "JUNGKOOK!" Silence. "Do you know him?" JUNGKOOK slowly lowered his eyes. That was all the confirmation anyone needed. A strange feeling settled over the room, because for the first time, the mystery surrounding JUNGKOOK seemed connected directly to JIMIN. Not indirectly. Directly. "Tell me what's going on," JIMIN demanded. JUNGKOOK shook his head. "Don't go." The answer came so quickly that it shocked everyone. "What?" JIMIN asked. "Don't go downstairs." The room became silent again. "Why?" JUNGKOOK looked genuinely terrified. "Just don't." "JUNGKOOK, please." That single word changed everything. JUNGKOOK never begged, not for himself, not for anything. Yet now he looked desperate. Desperate enough to forget his pride completely. JIMIN stared at him, trying to understand. "Who is he?" JUNGKOOK swallowed hard. "Someone you shouldn't meet." "That doesn't answer my question." "I know." "Then answer it." JUNGKOOK closed his eyes. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Taehyung suddenly stepped forward. "I know that look." Everyone turned toward him. "What look?" RM asked. Taehyung's expression darkened. "The same look he had 3 weeks ago." JUNGKOOK immediately opened his eyes. "Taehyung?" "No." Taehyung shook his head. "Not anymore." The room grew tense. JIMIN frowned. "What are you talking about?" Taehyung looked directly at JUNGKOOK. "Tell them." JUNGKOOK said nothing. "Tell them what happened 3 weeks ago." JIMIN's heart started beating faster. 3 weeks ago? Taehyung nodded slowly. The night JUNGKOOK disappeared. RM looked confused. Disappeared? For 6 hours. Jin's expression changed immediately. Wait, Suga sat forward. You're talking about that night? Taeyoung nodded again. J-Hope suddenly looked uncomfortable, because everyone remembered. 3 weeks earlier, JUNGKOOK had vanished after a rehearsal. Nobody could contact him. Nobody knew where he was. His phone remained off. When he finally returned, he claimed he had gone for a drive to clear his head. At the time, everyone accepted the explanation. Now it sounded ridiculous. You lied to us, RM said quietly. JUNGKOOK remained silent. Where were you? Jin asked. Silence. JUNGKOOK. Silence again. JIMIN felt his patience running out. Every answer seemed buried beneath another secret. Every truth seemed hidden behind another lie. Enough. The word came out sharper than he intended. Everyone looked at him. JIMIN stepped closer to the hospital bed. Enough hiding things. JUNGKOOK looked up. JIMIN. No. JIMIN shook his head. You've been lying for weeks. I was trying to protect. He stopped himself. Too late. Everyone heard it. The room went silent again. RM's eyes narrowed. Protect who? JUNGKOOK froze. Another mistake. Another piece of the puzzle. Protect who? RM repeated. JUNGKOOK didn't answer. But this time JIMIN already knew. He could feel it. Somehow, unbelievably, this entire nightmare revolved around him. Me? JIMIN asked quietly. JUNGKOOK's expression shattered. There it was. Confirmation. Real confirmation. Nobody needed words anymore. The answer was written all over JUNGKOOK's face. JIMIN felt his stomach drop. Why would you need to protect me? JUNGKOOK looked away. Because I made a mistake. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The words hung in the air. What mistake? JIMIN asked. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. The kind you can't take back. Before anyone could ask another question, the phone on the bedside table suddenly rang. Not a message this time. A call. The same caller. The same person. The screen illuminated the room. JUNGKOOK stared at it like it was a bomb about to explode. Nobody spoke. The ringing continued. Once. Twice. 3 times. Finally, JUNGKOOK reached for the phone. His hand trembled. JIMIN watched closely. Something told him that whatever happened next would change everything. JUNGKOOK accepted the call. He didn't put it on speaker. He simply held the phone to his ear. What do you want? He asked coldly. The room listened. JUNGKOOK's face remained expressionless for several seconds. Then suddenly, all color disappeared again. No. Silence. No. You stay away from him. More silence. I said stay away from him. Every person in the room immediately looked at JIMIN. JUNGKOOK was talking about him. There was no doubt anymore. Then the caller said something that nobody else could hear. Something that made JUNGKOOK sit upright despite the pain. Don't you dare. Another pause. Then JUNGKOOK's entire expression changed. Fear. Pure fear. The kind that couldn't be hidden. The kind that couldn't be faked. How do you know that? JUNGKOOK whispered. Nobody in the room had ever seen him look so terrified. Another few seconds passed. Then the call ended. JUNGKOOK lowered the phone slowly. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to, because everyone knew the same thing. Whatever the caller had just said was worse than anything they had imagined. JIMIN stepped forward. What happened? JUNGKOOK stared at him. His eyes looked completely different now. Not angry, not defensive, defeated. He's downstairs, JUNGKOOK whispered. The room fell silent. Who? RM asked. JUNGKOOK swallowed hard. Then he looked directly at JIMIN and spoke the words that made everyone's blood run cold. The man who ruined my life is here, and he's asking for you. The words hit the room like an explosion. Nobody moved for several seconds. Nobody even seemed capable of speaking. JIMIN stared at JUNGKOOK, trying to process what he had just heard. The man who ruined my life is here, and he's asking for you. The sentence didn't make sense. Not completely. Too many pieces were missing. Too many questions remained unanswered. Yet the fear in JUNGKOOK's eyes made one thing clear. He believed every word he had just said. What does that mean? JIMIN finally asked. JUNGKOOK looked exhausted. It means you can't go downstairs. Why? Because that's exactly what he wants. RM immediately stepped in. Start from the beginning. JUNGKOOK shook his head. There isn't enough time. Then give us the short version. There is no short version. The tension returned instantly. JIMIN could feel it building inside the room again. The mystery had only become bigger. Who is he? Jin asked. JUNGKOOK hesitated. Someone I should have stayed away from. That tells us nothing, Suga replied. JUNGKOOK lowered his gaze. I know. Another silence followed. The members exchanged uneasy looks. None of them liked what they were hearing. Not because the answers were frightening, because there were still almost no answers at all. Then the hospital room door opened again. The same nurse appeared. This time she looked more nervous. I'm sorry, she said carefully, but the man downstairs refuses to leave. Nobody liked that. RM's expression hardened immediately. What exactly is he doing? Waiting. Just waiting? The nurse nodded. He says he'll stay until Park Jimin comes down. Jimin felt a chill run through him. The situation was becoming stranger by the minute. Whoever this person was, he seemed completely focused on him. Yet Jimin had no memory of the name. No memory of meeting anyone connected to it. Nothing. I don't even know him, Jimin said. JUNGKOOK immediately looked up. That's what worries me. The answer made the room even quieter. Explain, Taeyoung demanded. JUNGKOOK rubbed a hand across his face. He looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump. 3 months ago, he began quietly. I met someone. Every member focused on him immediately. Finally, a real answer. Where? RM asked. Outside the company building. Who was he? JUNGKOOK hesitated. A businessman. Nobody spoke. JUNGKOOK continued. At least that's what he claimed. And? J-Hope asked. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly, and I was stupid enough to believe him. The room remained silent. JUNGKOOK rarely spoke about himself that way. When he did, it usually meant he genuinely regretted something. What happened? Jimin asked. JUNGKOOK stared at the blanket covering his legs. At first, nothing. Another pause. Then he started asking questions. Questions about what? Jin asked. About BTS. RM's expression immediately darkened. What kind of questions? Schedules. What else? Security. What else? JUNGKOOK closed his eyes. Jimin. The room froze. Every head turned toward him. Jimin felt his stomach tighten. Me? JUNGKOOK nodded slowly. Mostly you. The answer made no sense. Why? JUNGKOOK looked miserable. That's the problem. Nobody liked where this conversation was going. I thought he was harmless. JUNGKOOK continued. I thought he was just a fan with connections. And he wasn't? Suga asked. JUNGKOOK shook his head. Not even close. Jimin's heartbeat accelerated. The pieces still didn't fit together. Why would a stranger be interested in him? Why would JUNGKOOK be involved? Why would any of this lead to the hospital? What did you tell him? RM asked. JUNGKOOK immediately looked guilty. A terrible sign. JUNGKOOK. Not much. How much? JUNGKOOK hesitated. Enough. The answer landed heavily. RM looked frustrated. Jin looked concerned. Taeyoung looked furious. But Jimin noticed something else. Shame. JUNGKOOK looked ashamed. Truly ashamed. You trusted him, Jimin realized. JUNGKOOK nodded. For a while. Why? Because he knew things. What things? Things he shouldn't have known. The room became silent again. That wasn't reassuring. It was the exact opposite. Like what? Taeyoung asked. JUNGKOOK looked directly at him. Private information. Nobody spoke. JUNGKOOK continued. Schedules that weren't public. That's impossible, RM said immediately. I know. Then how did he know? JUNGKOOK's expression darkened. That's what I eventually started asking. The hospital room suddenly felt colder. More dangerous. because now the story wasn't about a random stranger anymore. It was about someone who had access to information he shouldn't have possessed. Someone who had somehow earned Jungkook's trust. Someone who now appeared to be hunting for JIMIN. "When did you realize something was wrong?" JIMIN asked. Jungkook's answer came immediately. "The first time he mentioned your apartment." Silence. Complete silence. JIMIN felt his chest tighten. "My apartment?" Jungkook nodded slowly. "He knew where you lived." Nobody said a word. The implications were too disturbing, too serious. RM's expression became colder than JIMIN had ever seen. "And you didn't tell us?" Jungkook looked away. "I thought I could handle it myself." "Handle it yourself?" Suga repeated. "Are you serious?" "I didn't want anyone else involved." "You mean JIMIN?" Jungkook didn't answer. Another confirmation. Another painful confirmation. Everything kept leading back to the same conclusion. Jungkook had been protecting JIMIN. Alone. For months. Then suddenly the nurse's phone rang. Everyone turned toward her. She answered quickly, listened for several seconds, then looked horrified. "What's wrong?" RM asked. The nurse swallowed hard. "Security just called." Nobody liked the sound of that. "Why?" The nurse looked directly at JIMIN. "The man downstairs isn't waiting in the lobby anymore." The room went completely silent. "Then where is he?" Jin asked. The nurse's voice trembled slightly. "According to security," she hesitated, "he's already inside the hospital." "::::" The words sent a wave of tension through the room so quickly that nobody reacted at first. For a brief second, everyone simply stared at the nurse. Then RM moved. "Call security back," he ordered immediately. The nurse nodded and hurried into the hallway. The door closed behind her. Silence remained. A dangerous silence. The kind that appears just before something goes wrong. JIMIN looked toward Jungkook. The younger man wasn't surprised. That was the worst part. He looked worried, but not surprised. As if he had expected this to happen all along. "You knew he might do that," JIMIN said quietly. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. "Yes." The room became even colder. "How?" Jin asked. Jungkook swallowed hard. "Because he never follows rules." Nobody liked that answer. "What does that mean?" Taehyung demanded. Jungkook stared at the floor. "It means when he decides he wants something, he doesn't stop." J-Hope frowned. "Something?" Jungkook slowly looked toward JIMIN. "Someone." The room fell silent again. JIMIN felt an uncomfortable weight settle in his chest. He still couldn't understand why a stranger would become obsessed with him. Nothing about this made sense. Yet every answer seemed to make the situation worse. RM crossed his arms. "Start talking." Jungkook nodded weakly. "There are rules." "Rules?" Suga repeated. "His rules." Jungkook's expression darkened. "At first I thought they were jokes." "What kind of rules?" Jin asked. Jungkook laughed bitterly. "The kind normal people don't make." Nobody interrupted. Jungkook continued. "He believed everything belonged to him." "What does that even mean?" Taehyung asked. "People, situations, conversations." Jungkook's voice became quieter. "Control." The word hung in the air. "If someone disagreed with him?" RM asked. "He punished them." The room immediately became still. JIMIN noticed the way Jungkook's hands tightened, the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes avoided everyone's gaze. Suddenly, the bruises from earlier came back into his mind. "Did he hurt you?" JIMIN asked. Jungkook didn't answer. Nobody needed him to. The silence was enough. Taehyung looked furious. "That bastard touched you?" Jungkook closed his eyes. "It wasn't supposed to get that far." "Answer me." "Yes." The single word changed everything. J-Hope looked stunned. Jin looked angry. Suga's expression became unreadable. RM looked like he was trying very hard not to lose his temper. But JIMIN felt something else. Guilt, crushing guilt. Because every piece of this story kept circling back to him. "Why?" JIMIN asked. "Why was he interested in me?" Jungkook looked exhausted. "Because he saw you once." Nobody understood. "Once?" JIMIN repeated. "At an event." Jungkook nodded slowly. That was enough. The answer felt wrong, disturbing, unreal. Yet JUNGKOOK wasn't joking. Not even close. "You're telling me this entire thing started because someone saw me?" JIMIN asked. "Yes. That's insane." "I know." The room remained silent. Then JUNGKOOK said something nobody expected. "The first time he talked about you, I thought it was harmless." JIMIN's stomach tightened. "What did he say?" JUNGKOOK looked away. "He asked if you were as kind as people claimed." Nobody spoke. "Then?" RM asked. "Then he asked about your schedule. And then your habits." The room became uncomfortable. "Then?" Jin asked. JUNGKOOK's voice dropped lower. "Then he started asking where you lived." Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. The obsession suddenly felt much more real, much more dangerous. "That's when you cut contact?" RM asked. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. "I should have." "But you didn't." "No." The guilt in his voice was obvious. "Why not?" JIMIN asked quietly. JUNGKOOK looked directly at him. "Because by then he already knew too much." A chill ran through the room. "Too much?" Suga asked. JUNGKOOK nodded. He knew where members went after schedules. "How?" "I don't know. He knew private routes." "How?" "I don't know. He knew things nobody outside should know." "I know." The frustration in JUNGKOOK's voice was growing. "That's when I realized I made a mistake." JIMIN stared at him. "So you tried to stop him?" "Yes. And that's when he hurt you." JUNGKOOK hesitated, then nodded. The answer made Taehyung stand up so suddenly that the chair behind him nearly fell over. "Why didn't you tell us?" he demanded. "Because I thought I could fix it." "Fix it?" Taehyung snapped. "You ended up in the hospital." JUNGKOOK looked away. There was no defense, no excuse. Because Taehyung was right. Everything had spiraled out of control. Then the door suddenly opened again. The nurse rushed back inside. Her face looked even paler than before. "Security found him," she said. Nobody liked her tone. "Where?" RM asked. The nurse swallowed hard. "4th floor." The room froze. "This floor?" Jen asked. She nodded. Every person in the room immediately understood the implication. The stranger wasn't somewhere else, in the hospital. He wasn't downstairs. He wasn't outside. He was already close. Very close. "How long ago?" RM asked. 2 minutes. Nobody spoke. The tension became unbearable. JUNGKOOK looked genuinely terrified now. "He's looking for the room," he whispered. JIMIN turned toward him. "How do you know?" JUNGKOOK's answer came instantly. "Because that's exactly what he would do." Another silence followed. Then something happened that made JUNGKOOK's expression collapse completely. A new message appeared on his phone. The screen illuminated beside the bed. Nobody touched it. Nobody needed to. Because the message preview was visible to everyone. 7 simple words. "I know which room you're in." The room fell silent. Then a second message arrived. This one was worse. Much worse. "Tell JIMIN I'm almost there." Nobody spoke after the second message appeared. For several seconds, the only sound in the room came from the heart monitor beside JUNGKOOK's bed. Beep, beep. Each sound seemed louder than the last. JIMIN stared at the phone screen, unable to look away. "Tell JIMIN I'm almost there." 7 words. 7 simple words that somehow felt like a threat. RM grabbed the phone first. His expression hardened immediately as he read the messages. Jin moved closer. Suga leaned forward. Taehyung looked ready to walk out and confront the stranger himself. "Security," RM said sharply. "Call them again." The nurse nodded and hurried back into the hallway. JUNGKOOK lowered his head into his hands. He looked exhausted beyond words. Not because the stranger was inside the hospital. Because his worst fear was finally happening. The thing he had spent months trying to prevent was unfolding right in front of him. "How long?" JIMIN asked quietly. JUNGKOOK didn't respond. "How long have you been dealing with this?" JUNGKOOK slowly raised his head. 3 months. The answer hit everyone hard. 3 months. 3 months of lies. 3 months of secrets. 3 months of carrying everything alone. Jimin couldn't understand it. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jungkook laughed bitterly. "Because the moment I told you, you'd become part of it. I already am." The room fell silent again. Neither of them looked away. For a moment, everyone else disappeared. There was only Jungkook and Jimin. Months of frustration, months of confusion, months of unanswered questions sitting between them. "You should have trusted me," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook's expression tightened. Trust wasn't the problem. Then, what was? Jungkook looked away first. "Losing you." The answer stunned the room. Nobody expected it. Not R.M., not Jin, not Suga, not Taehyung, not even Jimin. Jungkook immediately realized what he had said. But it was too late. The words were already out. "Jungkook," Jimin began. "Forget it?" "No. Forget it. Look at me." Jungkook refused. Jimin stepped closer. "Look at me." Slowly, Jungkook lifted his eyes. The fear in them was obvious now. Not fear of the stranger. Not fear of what might happen next. Fear of what Jimin might think. "You thought I'd leave?" Jimin asked. Jungkook didn't answer. "You thought I'd walk away if you told me the truth?" Silence. Another answer. Another painful answer. Jimin felt anger rise inside him again. But this time it wasn't directed at Jungkook. It was directed at everything that had happened. At the months wasted. At the secrets. At the unnecessary suffering. "You're an idiot," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook blinked. "What?" "You're an idiot." The room looked confused. Even Jungkook looked confused. Jimin shook his head. "You let yourself get hurt." Nobody interrupted. "You carried this alone." Still, nobody spoke. "And somehow, you convinced yourself that protecting me meant shutting me out." Jungkook lowered his gaze. Because he knew Jimin was right. Then suddenly, a loud noise echoed from somewhere outside the room. Everyone froze. The sound was distant but unmistakable. Raised voices, running footsteps. The hallway. RM immediately moved toward the door. "Stay here," he ordered. He stepped outside. Jin followed. Then Suga. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Only Jimin, Jungkook, Taehyung, and J-Hope remained inside. The noise outside grew louder. More voices. More movement. Something was happening. "What's going on?" J-Hope asked. Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Then Jungkook's phone vibrated again. Another message. Jimin picked it up before Jungkook could stop him. This time, there was no preview. He opened it. What he read made his stomach drop. The message contained a photograph. Nothing else. Just a photograph. A recent photograph. Jimin stared at it for several seconds. Then his face went pale. "What?" Taehyung asked immediately. Jimin couldn't answer. "Jimin!" Still nothing. Finally, Jimin turned the phone around. Taehyung's expression changed instantly. "What the hell?" J-Hope leaned forward. Then he saw it too. The photograph showed the hospital hallway. Their hallway. Taken only moments ago. The angle was clear. Whoever took it had been standing close enough to see their room. Close enough to watch them. Close enough to know exactly where they were. The realization hit everyone at once. He wasn't searching anymore. He had already found them. Jungkook looked completely defeated. "I told you," nobody replied, because there was nothing to say. Then another message arrived. One sentence. One horrifying sentence. "Nice view from outside. Room 417. The room went silent. Room 417. Their room." There was no doubt anymore. The stranger was close. Extremely close. Jimin felt a chill crawl down his spine. For the first time since this nightmare began, he understood why Jungkook had been so afraid. This wasn't obsession. This wasn't curiosity. This was something much darker. Much more dangerous. Then the door suddenly burst open. RM rushed back inside. His expression was grim. Security lost him. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. "What?" Taehyung asked. RM looked directly at Jungkook. He disappeared. The room became completely silent. "How?" J-Hope asked. "Nobody knows." RM's voice was tight with frustration. One minute they had eyes on him. The next minute he was gone. Jungkook slowly closed his eyes, because he already knew what that meant. "He's still here," he whispered. The words settled over the room like a shadow. Then, before anyone could respond, a soft knock echoed against the hospital room door. One knock. Calm, controlled, deliberate. Every person in the room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then a familiar voice came from the other side. A voice none of them had ever heard before. "JIMIN." The room turned ice cold. "I've been looking for you." Nobody moved. The knock had stopped, but the voice remained in everyone's mind. Calm, controlled, almost polite. Somehow that made it worse. Much worse. If the man had been yelling, security could have handled him. If he had been threatening them openly, the situation would have been simple. But this voice sounded patient, confident, like someone who already knew he had everyone's attention. "Don't open that door," Jungkook said immediately. His voice was barely above a whisper, yet every person in the room heard it clearly. RM stepped in front of the entrance without hesitation. Jin moved beside him. Suga silently positioned himself near the wall. Taehyung's eyes never left the door. Nobody intended to let the stranger inside. Another few seconds passed. Then the voice spoke again. "JIMIN, I know you're in there." The room remained silent. "I only want to talk." Nobody believed that, not for a second. JIMIN could feel his heartbeat pounding inside his chest. He had never met this man, had never spoken to him, yet somehow the stranger sounded familiar with him. Too familiar, as if they already knew each other. That alone was unsettling. "Go away," RM said firmly. Silence followed. Then a soft chuckle came from outside. "You must be the leader." Nobody liked that answer, because it meant he knew exactly who RM was. "Security's on the way," RM warned. "Then, I suppose I don't have much time." The stranger sounded completely relaxed. Jungkook looked worse by the second. His face had gone pale again. His hands were shaking. JIMIN noticed. "Jungkook." The younger man didn't respond. "Look at me." Slowly, Jungkook lifted his head. The fear in his eyes was undeniable. "What happens if he comes in?" JIMIN asked quietly. Jungkook's answer came instantly. "Nothing good." Another silence followed. Then the stranger spoke once more. "Jungkook." Every person in the room stiffened. "I know you're awake." Jungkook immediately looked away. "You never were very good at following instructions." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The voice continued. "I warned you not to involve anyone." Taehyung clenched his fists. RM's expression darkened. Jin looked ready to call every security guard in the building himself. "This isn't your decision anymore," RM said sharply. Another small laugh came from the hallway. "Actually, it became my decision 3 months ago." The sentence landed heavily. 3 months. The exact amount of time Jungkook had been hiding everything. The exact amount of time he had been carrying this nightmare alone. JIMIN suddenly understood something. The stranger wasn't here because of today. He wasn't here because of the hospital. He was here because something had gone wrong weeks ago, maybe months ago. Tonight was simply the result. "What do you want?" JIMIN asked. The room immediately turned toward him. Nobody expected him to speak. Nobody expected him to engage. Yet he had reached his limit. The uncertainty, the fear, the waiting. Enough. Silence answered him for several seconds. Then the stranger replied, "Finally." JIMIN felt his stomach tighten. "Answer the question." "I want 5 minutes." "For what?" "A conversation." "No," RM answered immediately. "Then 10 minutes." "No." 3? "No." The stranger sighed. "That's unfortunate." Nobody liked the sound of that. "Leave," RM ordered. "I can't." "Why?" The answer came instantly. Because I didn't come here for you. The room fell silent again. Then footsteps echoed outside. Slow footsteps, moving away from the door. Everyone listened. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Then, nothing. Complete silence. Nobody moved for several seconds. Did he leave? J-Hope whispered. Nobody knew. RM carefully approached the door. His hand reached the handle. Don't, JUNGKOok suddenly said. RM stopped. Why? JUNGKOok looked terrified. Because that's another rule. Everyone turned toward him. What? Jin asked. JUNGKOok swallowed hard. He likes people to think he's gone. A chill ran through the room. What are you talking about? Taehyung asked. JUNGKOok stared at the door. Whenever someone thinks they're safe, his voice dropped lower, that's when he comes back. Nobody liked that answer. Not at all. Then, a hospital-wide announcement suddenly echoed through the speakers. Attention! Security personnel requested to the east stairwell immediately. The room went silent. East stairwell, the exact area connected to their hallway. RM's expression hardened. He's moving. JUNGKOok immediately shook his head. No. What? RM asked. That's what he wants you to think. Another pause. Then JUNGKOok looked directly at JIMIN. His expression was more serious than ever. Listen to me carefully. JIMIN nodded. If anything happens, JUNGKOok began. Nothing is happening. Listen. The intensity in JUNGKOok's voice stopped everyone. If anything happens, you don't follow him. JIMIN frowned. Follow who? Him? Why would I follow him? JUNGKOok laughed bitterly. Because he's going to give you a reason. The room became silent. What reason? JIMIN asked. JUNGKOok hesitated. For several seconds, he looked like he was fighting with himself. Then he finally answered. Because he knows something about your past. JIMIN froze. Every person in the room froze. My past? JIMIN repeated. JUNGKOok slowly nodded. Something nobody here knows. The room felt colder than ever. JIMIN stared at him. What are you talking about? JUNGKOok opened his mouth. Then suddenly the television mounted on the hospital wall turned on by itself. Every head snapped toward the screen. Static flashed for a second, then an image appeared. A live camera feed. The hospital lobby. Nobody understood what they were seeing at first. Then the camera zoomed slightly. JIMIN's blood ran cold. A man stood alone in the center of the lobby, staring directly into the camera, smiling. In his hand was a folder. A thick folder filled with documents. The stranger slowly raised it toward the camera. Then he held up a single sheet of paper. Even from a distance, one name was clearly visible across the top. Park JIMIN. And beneath it was a date from years ago that JIMIN had hoped nobody would ever discover. The room fell into complete silence. Nobody looked away from the television screen. Nobody even seemed capable of speaking. The image remained there for several seconds. The stranger standing in the hospital lobby. The folder in his hands. The paper raised toward the camera. And at the top of that paper, one name. Park JIMIN. JIMIN felt every muscle in his body tense. The date beneath his name hit him even harder. Because he recognized it instantly. He wished he didn't. He wished he could tell himself it meant nothing. But he couldn't. The date came from a chapter of his life he had spent years trying to forget. A chapter almost nobody knew about. Not RM, not Jin, not Suga, not J-Hope, not Taehyung, and definitely not JUNGKOok. Yet somehow the stranger knew. JIMIN? RM's voice cut through the silence. What is that? JIMIN didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the moment he saw the date, memories he hadn't thought about in years came rushing back. Memories filled with pressure, failure, fear, sacrifices nobody had ever seen. The television screen flickered again. The stranger smiled directly into the camera. Then he slowly lowered the document and walked away. The feed disappeared. Static returned. Then the television shut itself off. The room remained silent. Nobody knew what to say. Finally, Jin spoke. "Jimin." Jimin stared at the dark screen. "Do you know what that was?" The question hung in the air. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. He could feel everyone looking at him, waiting, watching, trying to understand. "Yes," he whispered. Nobody liked that answer. "What does that mean?" Taehyung asked. Jimin swallowed hard. "It means he wasn't bluffing." RM frowned immediately. "Explain." Jimin rubbed a hand across his face. For the first time that night, he looked almost as exhausted as JUNGKOOK. "Before BTS became what it is now," he began quietly, "there was a period when I almost quit. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. I never told many people." Jin looked surprised. RM looked confused. Even JUNGKOOK's eyes widened slightly. "Quit?" J-Hope repeated. Jimin nodded. "Years ago." The room became still. "Why?" Suga asked. Jimin laughed softly. "Not because anything was funny. Because remembering still hurt. Because I wasn't sure I belonged here." Nobody spoke. Back then, everything felt uncertain. Jimin's voice remained calm, but there was pain beneath it. "I was struggling." Another silence followed. "What does that have to do with him?" RM asked. Jimin looked toward the floor. "Because during that time, there were records." "Records? Documents." The room immediately became tense again. "What kind of documents?" Jin asked. Jimin hesitated. "Evaluations." Nobody understood. "Evaluations from who?" "The company." Another pause. "Reports, reviews, assessments." RM frowned. "Internal documents?" Jimin nodded slowly. "Things that weren't supposed to leave." A chill moved through the room. Because now everyone understood the problem. If the stranger possessed documents connected to that period, then he had access to information nobody outside should have. Private information. Sensitive information. "What exactly is in them?" Taehyung asked. Jimin's expression darkened. "Things I'd rather keep buried." Nobody spoke. The answer was enough. JUNGKOOK suddenly looked sick. He found them. The words came out barely above a whisper. Jimin looked at him. "You knew?" JUNGKOOK nodded slowly. "Not exactly what they were." "Then what?" JUNGKOOK lowered his head. "I knew he had something." The room froze. "When?" RM asked sharply. "A month ago." "A month?" RM stared at him. "You knew for a month?" JUNGKOOK looked miserable. "I was trying to get them back." The answer made everything worse. "How?" Jin demanded. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. "By myself." Taehyung looked ready to explode. "Of course by yourself." Nobody stopped him. Because nobody disagreed. "You tried handling this alone." "Yes." "Again." "Yes." "And look where that got you." JUNGKOOK said nothing. There was no defense left, no excuse. Then Jimin suddenly remembered something. A conversation. Weeks ago, JUNGKOOK asking strange questions. Questions that felt random at the time. Questions about old trainee days, old schedules, old evaluations. Jimin had thought nothing of it. Now it all made sense. JUNGKOOK hadn't been curious. He had been investigating. "You were trying to protect me," Jimin realized quietly. JUNGKOOK looked away. Another confirmation. Another painful confirmation. The room became silent. Then, RM's phone rang. Everyone looked at him. He checked the screen. "Security." RM answered immediately. "What?" His expression changed. "When?" Silence. "Are you sure?" Another pause. Then, RM slowly lowered the phone. Nobody liked his face. "What happened?" Jin asked. RM looked directly at the group. "The man is gone." Nobody spoke. They had heard that before. Completely gone, RM continued. He left the building. A small amount of relief moved through the room. Very small. Because nobody trusted it. Especially JUNGKOOK. No, he whispered. RM frowned. Security checked every exit. JUNGKOOK shook his head. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? JUNGKOOK looked directly at JIMIN. His expression was filled with dread. He got what he wanted. The room became silent again. What did he want? JIMIN asked. JUNGKOOK's answer came instantly. For you to see the file. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke, because deep down, everyone knew he was probably right. The stranger hadn't come to attack anyone. He hadn't forced his way into the room. He hadn't even tried. Instead, he showed JIMIN something. Something specific. Something personal. Something connected to his past. A message. A warning. Or maybe an invitation. Then JIMIN's own phone suddenly vibrated inside his pocket. The sound seemed impossibly loud. Every person in the room turned toward him. Slowly, JIMIN pulled it out. One new message. Unknown number. Nobody breathed. JIMIN opened it. 3 words appeared on the screen. We need to talk. Beneath the message was a photograph. A photograph of another document. Another page from the same file. And this time, hidden near the bottom, JIMIN saw something that made his entire body go cold. Because next to his own name was JUNGKOOK's. For a moment, JIMIN couldn't breathe. His eyes remained fixed on the photograph displayed on his phone screen. Everything else disappeared. The hospital room, the members, the noise, the tension. None of it mattered anymore. Because beside his own name was another name that should never have appeared on that document. JUNGKOOK. JIMIN's hand tightened around the phone. What is it? RM asked. JIMIN didn't answer. He couldn't. Slowly, he turned the screen toward the others. One by one, their expressions changed. Confusion, concern, shock. Then JUNGKOOK saw it. The moment he did, all color drained from his face. No. The word escaped immediately. JUNGKOOK? Jin asked. JUNGKOOK looked genuinely horrified. No. What is that? Taehyung demanded. JUNGKOOK stared at the screen as if it were something alive, something dangerous. He found it. The room went silent. Found what? RM asked sharply. JUNGKOOK closed his eyes. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then he whispered something nobody expected. The report. JIMIN froze. Because suddenly he remembered. Not clearly, not completely, just enough. Years ago, during the trainee period, there had been rumors, internal evaluations, predictions, performance assessments, confidential discussions about who would succeed, who would fail, who would debut, who wouldn't. Most trainees never saw those reports. They weren't supposed to. Yet somehow this stranger had one, and somehow JUNGKOOK's name was connected to it. What report? Suga asked. JIMIN looked toward JUNGKOOK. Tell them. JUNGKOOK lowered his gaze. It's from before debut. The room immediately became still. Before debut? Jin repeated. JUNGKOOK nodded. One of the old assessments. Nobody interrupted. Why is your name on it? J-Hope asked. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly, because the report wasn't only about JIMIN. JIMIN felt his chest tighten. He suddenly remembered fragments, meetings, discussions, evaluations comparing trainees, ranking them, judging them, measuring them against each other. It compared us, JIMIN whispered. JUNGKOOK slowly nodded. The room became silent. Nobody liked where this was heading. Compared you how? RM asked. JUNGKOOK hesitated. Potential. Nobody spoke. Performance. Another pause. Future value. The room immediately became uncomfortable, because everyone understood what that meant. Corporate evaluations. Numbers. Rankings. Decisions made behind closed doors. Decisions capable of hurting people. Why would anyone care now? Taehyung asked. Because of what's inside. JUNGKOOK's answer came instantly. Jimin felt a sinking feeling growing inside him. He remembered enough now. Not every detail, but enough. There was a recommendation, he said quietly. RM looked at him. Recommendation? JIMIN nodded slowly. One that was never supposed to leave the company. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then JUNGKOOK finally said it. The report suggested replacing JIMIN. The room froze. Complete silence. Nobody reacted. Nobody even seemed capable of reacting. What? Jin whispered. JIMIN looked away. The memory hurt even now. Before debut, he said quietly, some people weren't sure I should stay. Nobody spoke. There were discussions. Another silence. Alternatives. Taehyung looked stunned. J-Hope looked shocked. RM looked furious. Suga's expression became unreadable. And? RM asked. JIMIN laughed softly, a sad laugh. One of the names suggested as a replacement. He couldn't finish immediately. JUNGKOOK finished it for him. Was me. The room went completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the hospital seemed quiet. JIMIN stared at the floor. He hadn't thought about this in years, not because he forgot, because he chose not to remember. That's impossible, Taehyung said. It happened. JIMIN's voice remained calm, but nothing came from it. Still. Taehyung looked angry now. Who even writes something like that? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Or perhaps nobody wanted to know. The point wasn't the report itself. The point was that someone now possessed it. Someone willing to use it. Someone dangerous enough to hunt them across the city. Why would he show you this? Jin asked. JIMIN's stomach tightened. Because he already knew the answer. Before he could speak, JUNGKOOK answered first. Because he wants us against each other. The room became silent. What? J-Hope asked. JUNGKOOK nodded. Think about it. Nobody interrupted. He spent months collecting information. Another pause. Months looking for weaknesses. And? RM asked. And he finally found one. JUNGKOOK looked directly at JIMIN. The past. JIMIN understood immediately. The stranger didn't care about the report itself. He cared about what it could do. Doubt. Resentment. Old wounds. Pain. If handled correctly, those things could destroy relationships. Friendships. Trust. Entire groups. He's trying to divide us, RM realized. JUNGKOOK nodded. Yes. The room became silent again. Then JIMIN's phone vibrated. Once. Twice. 3 times. Another message. The unknown number again. Everyone stared at the screen. Slowly, JIMIN opened it. A new photograph appeared. This one wasn't a document. It was an old picture. Years old. The quality was poor. The lighting was terrible. But the people inside it were unmistakable. JIMIN and JUNGKOOK. During their trainee years, standing outside the company building, looking exhausted after practice. Nobody understood why the stranger had sent it. Then JIMIN noticed the timestamp beneath the image. The exact same date as the report. His stomach dropped. Because now he understood something terrifying. The stranger didn't just have documents. He had records. Photos. Information. Evidence collected across years. Years. How much does he know? Jin asked quietly. Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Then another message arrived. This time there was no photograph. Just one sentence. One sentence that made JUNGKOOK stand up from the hospital bed, despite the pain shooting through his ribs. I haven't shown him the truth yet. The room froze. JUNGKOOK stared at the screen. His face had gone completely white. JIMIN looked at him. What truth? JUNGKOOK didn't answer. JUNGKOOK. Silence. What truth? JUNGKOOK slowly lifted his eyes. The fear in them was worse than anything JIMIN had seen all night. Then he whispered 5 words that changed everything. The report wasn't finished, The room went silent again. Not the kind of silence caused by confusion, the kind caused by fear. Because everyone immediately understood what JUNGKOOK meant. If the report wasn't finished, then what they had seen so far was only part of the story. Only part of whatever secret the stranger was trying to expose. JIMIN stared at JUNGKOOK. What do you mean it wasn't finished? JUNGKOOK looked trapped, like someone standing between two terrible choices. There was another section. What section? JUNGKOOK didn't answer immediately. His eyes shifted toward the window, then toward the floor. Anywhere except JIMIN. That alone was enough to make the tension worse. JUNGKOOK, I never saw the entire thing. Then, how do you know? JUNGKOOK swallowed hard. Because somebody showed me part of it years ago. Nobody interrupted. Who? RM asked. JUNGKOOK shook his head. I don't remember. Shoga immediately frowned. You remember? JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. Maybe I do. Then say it. JUNGKOOK looked exhausted. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters now. RM's voice was firm. Everything matters now. Another silence followed. JIMIN could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. Every answer seemed to uncover another secret, another hidden piece of history, another reason for this nightmare. What was in the second section? JIMIN asked quietly. JUNGKOOK closed his eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded distant. Predictions. Nobody understood. Predictions about what? Jin asked. The future. The room remained silent. JUNGKOOK continued. The report wasn't just evaluating trainees. Another pause. It tried to predict what would happen after debut. J-Hope looked confused. That's ridiculous. I know. Nobody can predict that. I know. Yet JUNGKOOK still looked terrified, which meant there was more. Much more. What did it say? Taehyung asked. JUNGKOOK's jaw tightened. Some of it was wrong. Nobody spoke, but not all of it. The answer landed heavily. JIMIN felt his stomach tighten. Because suddenly, he understood why JUNGKOOK didn't want to talk about this. What did it say about me? JIMIN asked. JUNGKOOK looked directly at him. That you'd become one of the most important people in the group. Nobody reacted. That wasn't shocking. Not now. Not after everything they had accomplished together. And? JIMIN asked. Because he could tell there was more. Much more. JUNGKOOK looked away again. It also said you'd become a source of conflict. The room froze. Conflict? RM repeated. JUNGKOOK nodded slowly. Pressure? Expectations? Competition? JIMIN remained silent. He could already see where this was heading. He hated it. What did it say about you? JIMIN asked. The room immediately turned toward JUNGKOOK. He didn't answer. JUNGKOOK? Still nothing. Answer me! Finally, JUNGKOOK laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because there was no point hiding it anymore. It said I would always choose you. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The words settled over the room like a shadow. JIMIN stared at him. RM stared at him. Jin stared at him. Everyone stared at him. JUNGKOOK looked embarrassed, angry, exhausted. What? Taehyung asked quietly. JUNGKOOK rubbed a hand across his face. The report suggested that my decisions would eventually be influenced by protecting JIMIN. Nobody spoke, because suddenly everything made sense. The lies, the secrets, the months of silence, the injuries, the sacrifices. Everything. JUNGKOOK had spent months trying to protect JIMIN, exactly like the report predicted. That's impossible, Jin said. I know. JUNGKOOK's voice sounded bitter. But that's what it said. JIMIN couldn't look away. Something inside him felt strangely heavy. Because suddenly, he remembered dozens of moments. Small moments. Times when JUNGKOOK stayed behind, after everyone left. Times when JUNGKOOK quietly checked if he was okay. Times when JUNGKOOK absorbed pressure without complaining. Times when Jungkook protected him without ever asking for recognition. Things Jimin had noticed but never fully understood. Until now. The stranger knows this? RM asked. Jungkook nodded. Yes, and he's using it. Yes, another silence followed. Then Jimin's phone vibrated again. Nobody wanted to look. Yet everyone did. Another message. Another unknown number. Jimin opened it. This time there was no photograph. No document. Just a single paragraph. His eyes moved across the screen. Then his entire expression changed. What? Taehyung asked immediately. Jimin didn't answer. Jimin? Still nothing. RM stepped forward. What did he send? Slowly, Jimin handed over the phone. RM read the message. His expression hardened instantly. Then he passed it to Jin. Then, Suga. Then, Taehyung. Each reaction became worse than the last. Finally, Taehyung lowered the phone. That's psycho, he whispered. Jimin remained silent. Because the message wasn't directed at the group, it was directed at him. Specifically him. The stranger claimed there was a final section missing from the report, a section nobody else had seen. A section that allegedly explained why Jungkook had been selected over dozens of other trainees, why certain decisions had been made behind closed doors, why certain people had been protected, why others had not. Most importantly, the stranger claimed the final section contained one name, a name connected to both Jimin and Jungkook, a name powerful enough to change how they viewed their entire history together. He's lying, Jungkook said immediately. Nobody looked convinced. He's manipulating us. Maybe, Suga replied quietly. But how does he know all this? Jungkook didn't answer, because that question had no good answer. Then another message arrived. This time everyone heard the notification. Another sentence appeared on the screen. Short, simple, terrifying. Meet me alone and I'll show you the final page. Jimin stared at the words. His heartbeat accelerated. RM immediately shook his head. Absolutely not. Agreed, Jin said. No chance. Delete it, Taehyung added. Jungkook looked directly at Jimin. Don't do it. The answer came instantly. Desperately. Almost pleading. Jimin. Jimin looked at him. Don't. The room became silent. Because for the first time all night, Jimin wasn't sure what he wanted to do. Then another message appeared before anyone could speak. Just 5 words. 5 words that made Jungkook's face completely collapse. Ask him about Busan. Nobody understood at first. Except Jungkook. Because the moment he read it, genuine terror appeared in his eyes. And that terrified Jimin more than anything else the stranger had done.
The room immediately noticed the change in Jungkook's face. Whatever the stranger had just referenced, it wasn't connected to the report. It wasn't connected to the trainee evaluations. It was something else, something far more personal. Jungkook's hands began shaking again, not from pain, not from exhaustion, fear, real fear. What does that mean? RM asked. Jungkook didn't answer. Jungkook, silence. Answer me. Jungkook stared at the phone screen as if looking at something he wished he could erase forever. Nothing. Nobody believed him, not even for a second. That's not nothing, Taehyung snapped. Then drop it. The answer came too fast, too defensive. Another confirmation, another secret. Jimin felt frustration rising again. Every time they got close to the truth, another wall appeared, another locked door, another hidden piece of the story. Busan, Jimin repeated quietly. What happened in Busan? Jungkook looked away immediately. Nothing. Stop lying. The room went silent because this wasn't the first lie, not the second, not even the 10th. Tell me. Jungkook remained silent. Jimin stepped closer. Tell me. Jungkook laughed bitterly. You don't want to know. Then let me decide that. Another silence followed. Long, uncomfortable, heavy. Finally, Jungkook spoke. 2 months ago. Nobody interrupted. I received a message. His voice sounded distant now. Like someone revisiting a memory they hated. From him. The stranger, RM asked. Jungkook nodded. He wanted to meet. And you went? Jin asked immediately. Jungkook looked guilty. Yes. The room reacted exactly as expected: frustration, disbelief, anger. Why? Taehyung demanded. Because he threatened someone. Nobody spoke. Who? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook's eyes lifted, straight to Jimin. The answer was obvious. Jimin felt his stomach drop. Me. Jungkook nodded. He claimed he had information about your schedule. Silence. And I believed him. Another pause, so I met him. Nobody liked where this story was going, not at all. Where? Suga asked. Jungkook hesitated. Busan. The room became still. Alone? RM asked. Yes. You actually went alone? Jungkook nodded. Nobody knew whether to be angry or shocked. What happened? Jimin asked. Jungkook stared at the floor. At first. Another bitter laugh. Nothing. Nobody interrupted. He talked. About what? Jin asked. You. The answer immediately made the room uncomfortable. Everything was about you. Jungkook's voice sounded exhausted. Where you went, what you liked, who you talked to. Jimin felt increasingly uneasy. That's insane. I know. And then, Jungkook's jaw tightened. Then he started making demands. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Demands, RM repeated. Jungkook nodded. Information. What kind? Private information. About who? You. Another silence followed. What did you do? Jimin asked. Jungkook laughed bitterly. Nothing, nothing. I refused. The answer surprised nobody. Then what happened? Taehyung asked. Jungkook's eyes darkened. He got angry. Nobody needed details, nobody wanted them, because suddenly the bruised ribs, the hidden injuries, the hospital bed, everything connected. He hurt you, Jimin whispered. Jungkook didn't answer, another confirmation. Jimin felt guilt twisting inside his chest. Because of me? No. Jungkook answered immediately. Don't. Jungkook. Don't. His voice became firmer. This wasn't your fault. The room fell silent, because despite everything, Jungkook still sounded more concerned about Jimin than himself. Then Jimin remembered something the stranger's message implied. He said ask about Busan. Jungkook looked uncomfortable immediately. Forget it. Why? Because it doesn't matter. It matters if he's using it against you. Jungkook closed his eyes. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then he finally whispered, there was a recording. The room froze. A recording? RM repeated. Jungkook nodded slowly. Of what? Jungkook looked miserable. The meeting. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. He recorded everything. Another pause. Without my knowledge. Jimin immediately understood why that was dangerous. And, Jungkook laughed bitterly. And now he has hours of audio. The room became silent again. Audio of what? Taehyung asked. Jungkook looked away. Conversations. About? Jimin. Nobody liked that answer, not one bit. What conversations? RM asked. Jungkook hesitated, then another notification interrupted him. This time it wasn't Jimin's phone, it was Jungkook's. The entire room looked toward it. Another message from the stranger. Jungkook didn't want to open it. Jimin could see that immediately, but it was too late. The preview appeared across the lock screen. Everyone saw it, every single person. The message contained only one sentence. Funny how nobody knows what you said that night. The room became completely silent. Jungkook looked like he had stopped breathing. What did you say? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook didn't answer. Jungkook, still nothing. What did you say? Another long silence followed. Then Jungkook whispered something that nobody expected. Things I thought nobody would ever hear. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Jimin stared at him. Jungkook looked devastated. Whatever was on that recording wasn't a secret about BTS. It wasn't a secret about the company. It wasn't even a secret about the stranger. It was something personal, something deeply personal, something Jungkook had hidden for years. Then Jimin's phone vibrated again. One final message appeared, the longest message yet. Jimin opened it. His eyes moved across the screen. Then his entire expression changed. RM immediately noticed. What now? Nobody answered. Jimin continued reading. Line after line, word after word. Then slowly he lowered the phone. The room waited. Finally, Jimin spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. He says he has the recording. Nobody moved. And, Jin asked. Jimin swallowed hard. He says if I don't meet him by midnight. The room became silent. He's going to release everything. Nobody breathed. Then Jimin looked directly at Jungkook and asked the one question that had been growing between them all night. Jungkook. His voice was quiet, careful. What exactly did you say in Busan that you're so afraid of me hearing? The question hung in the air like a weight nobody could escape. Jungkook didn't answer. He couldn't. The room remained completely silent. Even the steady beeping of the heart monitor seemed distant now. Jimin stared at him, waiting. RM waited. Jin waited. Suga, J-Hope, Taehyung, everyone waited, but Jungkook simply looked down at his hands. Jungkook! Jimin's voice was calmer this time. Look at me. Slowly, Jungkook raised his head. His eyes were red, exhausted, defeated. For the first time all night, he looked like someone who had run out of places to hide. You already know, Jungkook whispered. Jimin frowned. No, you do. Then say it. Another silence. Jungkook laughed quietly, a painful laugh. That's exactly what I'm trying not to do. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Because suddenly everyone understood that whatever was on the recording wasn't connected to the stranger's obsession. It wasn't connected to the reports. It wasn't connected to the company. It was connected to Jungkook himself. What happened in Busan? Jimin asked again. Jungkook looked away. He wanted information. I know. I refused. I know. Then he kept talking. Nobody spoke. Jungkook continued. Hours. Another pause. He wouldn't stop. And, RM asked. Jungkook swallowed hard. Eventually he started making claims. The room became silent again. What kind of claims? Jin asked. Jungkook's jaw tightened. About Jimin. Jimin felt his chest tighten immediately. What claims? Jungkook laughed bitterly. The kind designed to make people angry. Nobody liked the sound of that. Explain. RM's voice was firm. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly. He said Jimin didn't need me. Silence. He said I was wasting my time. Another silence. He said if I disappeared tomorrow, nothing would change. The room froze. Nobody expected that. Nobody. Jimin felt something twist painfully inside his chest. Jungkook, that's not the worst part. Jungkook interrupted quietly. The room remained still. Then what is? Taehyung asked. Jungkook looked directly at Jimin. I answered him. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The tension became unbearable. What did you say? Jimin asked. Jungkook immediately looked away again. Nothing important. Stop lying. The answer came instantly. Tell me. Another silence followed. Then Jungkook laughed softly, not because anything was funny, because resistance had become pointless. I got angry. Nobody interrupted. Really angry. Another pause. And I started talking. Jimin's heartbeat accelerated. Talking about what? Jungkook looked exhausted. You. The room fell silent. What about me? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook hesitated. Everything. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Everything. Jin repeated. Jungkook nodded. Years of things. Like what? Taehyung asked. Jungkook rubbed a hand across his face. Things I noticed. Another pause. Things I remembered. Jungkook. RM's voice was careful now. Be specific. Jungkook laughed bitterly again. I told him he was wrong. Nobody interrupted. I told him Jimin mattered. Another silence. I told him people underestimated him. Jimin couldn't look away. And, Jungkook swallowed hard, I kept talking. The room remained silent because nobody missed the emotion hidden beneath his words. For how long? Suga asked quietly. Jungkook stared at the floor. Almost an hour. That answer stunned everyone. An hour, an entire hour. You talked about Jimin for an hour, J-Hope asked. Jungkook looked embarrassed immediately. I was angry. Nobody replied. Because that explanation wasn't helping. What exactly did you say? Jimin asked. The room became still again. Jungkook opened his mouth, then closed it, opened it again. Finally, he whispered things I shouldn't have said. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then Jimin's phone vibrated again. Another message, the stranger. Everyone looked at the screen. Slowly, Jimin opened it. This time there was an audio file attached. The room froze, nobody breathed, nobody blinked. An audio file, the recording. Jungkook's face went completely white. No, the word escaped immediately. Don't. Jimin looked at him. Jungkook, don't play it. The desperation in his voice shocked everyone. Please. Silence filled the room. Jungkook never begged, yet now he sounded terrified, truly terrified. Why? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook couldn't answer, not immediately, because once you hear it, his voice cracked slightly. You can't unhear it. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The room felt smaller than ever. Heavier than ever. Then another message arrived beneath the audio file, just one sentence. One sentence that made everyone uncomfortable. Let him hear what he means to you. The room went completely silent. Jimin stared at the screen, then slowly looked up at Jungkook. Jungkook looked like he wanted the floor to open beneath him, like he wanted to disappear, like he wanted anything except this moment. And for the first time all night, Jimin realized something terrifying. Jungkook wasn't afraid of the stranger anymore. He was afraid of him. Nobody spoke for several long seconds after that realization settled over the room. Jimin kept staring at Jungkook. The more he looked at him, the more obvious it became. The fear wasn't directed toward the stranger standing somewhere outside their reach. It wasn't directed toward the recording. It wasn't even directed toward the consequences. It was directed toward Jimin's reaction, toward what might happen after the truth came out. "JUNGKOOK." Jimin's voice was quiet now, careful. "Look at me." Slowly, reluctantly, JUNGKOOK lifted his eyes. There was no anger left in them, no defensiveness, only exhaustion. "Are you afraid I'll hate you?" The question stunned the room. JUNGKOOK immediately looked away again. That was enough of an answer. Jimin felt something painful settle inside his chest, because suddenly months of strange behavior started making sense. The distance, the silence, the secrets, the walls JUNGKOOK had built around himself. They weren't there because he didn't trust Jimin. They were there because he was terrified of losing him. "You're unbelievable," Jimin whispered. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. "I know." "No," Jimin shook his head. "You really don't." Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared, because for the first time all night, the conversation wasn't about the stranger. It wasn't about the reports. It wasn't about hidden documents or old secrets. It was about them. "You spent months protecting me," Jimin continued. "You got hurt protecting me." JUNGKOOK lowered his gaze. "Somehow you convinced yourself that the thing I would care about most is a recording." Silence, heavy silence. JUNGKOOK didn't answer, couldn't answer, because there wasn't a good answer. Then RM stepped forward. "We still don't know what's on it." The reminder brought reality crashing back into the room. Everyone looked at the phone again. The audio file remained there, waiting, a digital time bomb, the stranger's final weapon. "Delete it," JUNGKOOK said immediately. "No." Jimin's answer came just as quickly. JUNGKOOK's face tightened. "Jimin, no, don't do this. Then tell me what's on it." Another silence, another wall, another secret. JUNGKOOK rubbed a hand across his face. "I was angry. I know. I wasn't thinking clearly. I know. And I said things." "I know." Jimin stepped closer. "What things?" JUNGKOOK looked trapped, completely trapped. Before he could answer, another notification appeared on the phone screen. This time it wasn't a message. It was a countdown timer. Everyone froze. The stranger had sent a live countdown. 58 minutes, 57 seconds, 56 seconds. The numbers immediately began moving. "What is that?" Jin asked. Jimin's stomach dropped. He already knew. Another message appeared beneath it. "Midnight. After that, everyone hears it." The room went silent. "He's serious," J-Hope whispered. Nobody disagreed, because this wasn't a threat anymore. It was a schedule, a plan, a deadline. The stranger had stopped hiding, stopped pretending. Whatever game he was playing had reached its final stage. "We need to find him," RM said immediately. "Now," Suga nodded. "Agreed." "Security is already searching," Jin added. "Then we search too." Taehyung looked furious. "I'm done waiting." For the first time all night, JUNGKOOK disagreed. "No," everyone looked at him. "No," RM repeated. JUNGKOOK shook his head. "That's what he wants." The room became silent. "What?" J-Hope asked. "Chaos." JUNGKOOK's answer came instantly. "Separation." Another pause. Panic. Nobody interrupted. "The moment we scatter, he wins." RM frowned. "Then what do you suggest?" JUNGKOOK looked toward Jimin. "Stay together." The answer surprised everyone. "That's it?" Jin asked. "Yes, just stay here." "Yes." Taehyung looked frustrated. "You're telling us to wait." JUNGKOOK nodded slowly. "Because the recording isn't the real goal." Silence. "Then what is?" Jimin asked. JUNGKOOK hesitated, then he finally answered. "Me." The room froze. "What?" RM asked. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. "This was always about me." Nobody understood. "Explain." JUNGKOOK looked exhausted. "The reports." Another pause. "The photos." Another pause. "The messages." He looked directly at Jimin. "Those were just ways to reach me." The room became silent again. "Why?" Jin asked. JUNGKOOK's expression darkened. "Because I stopped doing what he wanted." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then suddenly another memory surfaced in Jimin's mind. Earlier, hours earlier. Before all of this, before the hospital, before the collapse, one detail still didn't make sense. "JUNGKOOK." JUNGKOOK looked at him. "The accident." The room immediately became still. "What about it?" RM asked. Jimin didn't look away from JUNGKOOK. "You never told us what actually happened tonight." Silence, complete silence. JUNGKOOK's face changed immediately. "JUNGKOOK." Nobody breathed. "Tell us." Another pause, then another. Finally, JUNGKOOK whispered, "It wasn't an accident." The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The sentence landed harder than anything else that night, because deep down everyone already suspected it. They just didn't want it to be true. "Then what happened?" RM asked quietly. JUNGKOOK looked toward the window. "I met him." Every person in the room went still. "Tonight?" Jin asked. JUNGKOOK nodded. "Before I collapsed." Nobody spoke. Nobody interrupted. Why? Taehyung demanded. Jungkook's answer came immediately. Because he said he had something about Jimin. The room became silent again. Then Jungkook revealed the truth he had been hiding since the beginning. And when I tried to take it from him, his voice dropped lower. He pushed me. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. What? RM whispered. Jungkook closed his eyes. That's how I got hurt. The room exploded with questions, but before anyone could ask them, Jimin's phone vibrated again. Another message. Another unknown notification. Slowly, Jimin opened it. The moment he read it, every drop of color disappeared from his face. Jimin? RM asked immediately. No answer. What is it? Silence. Finally, Jimin lifted the screen toward the others. The message contained only one sentence that changed everything. You're asking the wrong question. Ask Jungkook what he took from me. The room went completely silent. Nobody looked away from the phone's screen. Nobody seemed capable of speaking. The message sat there like a grenade dropped into the middle of everything. You're asking the wrong question. Ask Jungkook what he took from me. Jimin slowly lowered the phone. His eyes immediately found Jungkook. The younger man's face had gone pale again, worse than before, much worse. That reaction alone was enough to terrify everyone. Jungkook. RM's voice was calm, too calm. What is he talking about? Jungkook didn't answer. Jungkook. Silence. Answer me. Jungkook stared at the floor, his jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists. The room waited. Another few seconds passed, then Taehyung stepped forward. What did you take? The question hung heavily in the air. Jungkook laughed bitterly, not because anything was funny, because there was no good way to explain it. Nothing belonged to him. Nobody interrupted. That's not an answer, Jin replied. Jungkook nodded slowly. I know. Another silence followed. Then Jimin asked the question himself. What did you take? For a moment it looked like Jungkook wasn't going to answer at all. Then he finally spoke. A drive. Nobody understood. A drive, J-Hope repeated. Jungkook nodded. A storage drive. The room became still. What was on it? RM asked immediately. Jungkook looked exhausted. Information. What information? Everything. Nobody liked that answer, not one bit. Define everything, Suga said quietly. Jungkook swallowed hard. Photos. Another pause. Schedules. Another pause. Documents. Another pause. Personal files. The room froze. Personal files, Jin repeated. Jungkook nodded. Files about BTS. Nobody spoke. Files about staff. Another pause. Files about Jimin. The room fell silent again. Suddenly the pieces began fitting together, not perfectly, but enough. You stole it, Taehyung realized. Jungkook immediately shook his head. No. Then what? I took it back. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Back? RM asked. Jungkook looked directly at him. Because it never should have existed in the first place. The answer landed heavily. The stranger hadn't simply collected information. He had built something, a database, a record, a collection, months, maybe years, worth of private information. You took it from him tonight? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook nodded. Yes. That's why you met him. Yes. Another silence. And that's why he pushed you. Yes. Everything suddenly made sense. The collapse, the injury, the panic, the hospital. The stranger wasn't furious because Jungkook refused to cooperate. He was furious because Jungkook had taken something valuable, something important, something dangerous. Where is it now? RM asked. Jungkook hesitated, a terrible sign. Jungkook. Another pause. Where is it? Jungkook slowly reached toward the drawer beside the hospital bed. The room watched, nobody breathed. He opened the drawer, reached inside, then pulled out a small black storage drive. The room froze. You've had it this whole time. Jin asked. Jungkook nodded. Yes. Nobody knew what to say because sitting in Jungkook's hand was the center of the entire nightmare. Months of fear, months of manipulation, months of obsession, all reduced to a device small enough to fit in a pocket. Jimin stared at it. What's actually on there? Jungkook looked miserable. I don't know. What? Taehyung asked. I never checked. The room exploded with disbelief. You never checked? J-Hope asked. No. Why? Jungkook laughed bitterly. Because I was trying to get it away from him, not study it. Nobody had a response to that. Then suddenly another message arrived, this time on Jungkook's phone. Everyone heard the notification, everyone looked. Nobody wanted to open it, yet everyone knew they had to. Jungkook stared at the screen, then slowly unlocked it. The message contained a photograph, nothing more. The moment he saw it, his face collapsed. Jungkook, Jimin asked, no answer. What is it? Slowly, Jungkook turned the screen toward them. The room froze. It was a photograph of the storage drive, the exact same drive, taken weeks earlier. Beside it sat a handwritten note. 5 simple words, bring it back or else. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then another photograph appeared. A second image. This one was worse, much worse. The picture showed JUNGKOOK, alone, walking through a parking structure at night. The image had clearly been taken from a distance without his knowledge. He's been following you, Jin whispered. JUNGKOOK didn't answer. Because the truth was obvious. Another image arrived, then another, then another. Every one of them showed the same thing. JUNGKOOK, different days, different locations, different times, being watched, being tracked, being photographed. The room became ice cold. How long? RM asked quietly. JUNGKOOK swallowed hard. Months. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The realization was horrifying. The stranger hadn't only been collecting information about JIMIN. He had been monitoring JUNGKOOK too, constantly. Obsessively. Then another message appeared beneath the photographs. One sentence, one final sentence. The countdown is no longer about the recording. The room froze. JUNGKOOK immediately looked sick. What does that mean? JIMIN asked. Nobody answered. Another message arrived before anyone could react. Midnight, drive for recording. The room became completely silent. RM stared at the screen. He's offering a trade. JUNGKOOK immediately shook his head. No, JUNGKOOK. No, the recording. No. His answer came instantly, desperately, almost violently. He's lying. Maybe. RM crossed his arms. Maybe not. JUNGKOOK looked terrified, not because of the drive, not because of the stranger, because of the recording. The thing he feared most remained the same. Then JIMIN suddenly understood something that had been bothering him for hours. You don't care about the drive anymore. The room turned toward him. JIMIN kept looking at JUNGKOOK. You're not afraid of what's on it. JUNGKOOK said nothing. You're afraid of that recording. Silence. Another answer, another confirmation. Why? JIMIN asked quietly. JUNGKOOK looked away. Then for the first time all night he whispered the truth. Because the drive can be destroyed. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. But once you hear me, his voice cracked slightly. That can't be taken back. The room fell silent. Then suddenly every phone in the room vibrated at the same time. RM's, Jin's, Suga's, Taehyung's, J-Hope's, Jimin's. Even JUNGKOOK's. Everyone looked down. The same notification appeared on every screen. A scheduled upload, set to publish at midnight. File name, BUSAN recording full, and beneath it a preview button that anyone could press. For several seconds nobody touched their phone, nobody spoke, nobody even seemed capable of breathing normally. Every screen displayed the same thing. The same scheduled upload, the same countdown, the same file name. BUSAN recording full, 42 minutes remaining, 41 minutes and 59 seconds, 41 minutes and 58 seconds. The timer continued moving, relentless, unstoppable. JIMIN stared at the preview button. One touch, one press, one decision. And everything would change. JUNGKOOK looked absolutely terrified, more terrified than when the stranger appeared, more terrified than when security lost him, more terrified than when the documents surfaced. The realization hit JIMIN immediately. Whatever was inside that recording mattered more to JUNGKOOK than anything else. Nobody touches it. RM's voice cut through the silence. Everyone looked at him. Not yet. Jin nodded immediately. Agreed. We don't know what's inside. J-Hope folded his arms. And that's exactly why we shouldn't play it. Suga remained quiet, but his expression said enough. Nobody wanted to make the wrong move. Not now, not when emotions were already running high. Then JIMIN asked the question everyone else was avoiding. If we don't listen to it, the room turned toward him. What happens at midnight? Nobody answered, because everyone already knew. The stranger had made that clear. The recording would be released, publicly, permanently. We find him first, Taehyung said immediately. That's the answer. RM nodded. Security is still searching. Not fast enough, Taehyung replied. Nobody disagreed. The countdown continued. 40 minutes, 39 minutes, 38. Every passing second felt heavier, more dangerous. Then JUNGKOOK suddenly reached for his phone. The movement caught everyone's attention immediately. He stared at the scheduled upload screen for several seconds. Then he made a decision. JUNGKOOK, JIMIN asked. JUNGKOOK didn't answer. Instead, he opened the messaging thread with the stranger. Everyone watched. Slowly, JUNGKOOK typed something. RM stepped closer. What are you doing? No response. JUNGKOOK finished typing, then hit send. The room went silent. What did you send? Jin asked. JUNGKOOK lowered the phone. His face looked calm for the first time all night, strangely calm, almost resigned. I accepted. The room froze. You what? Taehyung snapped. JUNGKOOK looked directly at him. I accepted the trade. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Absolutely not. RM's answer came instantly. It's already done. JUNGKOOK, it's done. The tension exploded through the room. You don't make that decision alone, Jin argued. I already did. Why? J-Hope demanded. JUNGKOOK's answer came immediately. Because this started with me. Nobody interrupted. Because I should have stopped him months ago. Another pause. Because everyone here is paying for my mistake. The room fell silent. JIMIN stared at him. So your solution is to meet him again? JUNGKOOK looked away. Yes. The same person who pushed you. Yes. The same person who followed you for months. Yes. The same person who threatened all of us. Yes. The answer sounded ridiculous even as it left his mouth. Yet JUNGKOOK looked completely serious. No, JIMIN shook his head. You're not doing that. I have to. No, JIMIN, no. The room became silent again. JUNGKOOK looked exhausted. You don't understand. Then explain it. Another pause, another hesitation. Then JUNGKOOK finally revealed the truth he had been hiding beneath everything else. Because the recording isn't the only thing he has. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. What? RM asked quietly. JUNGKOOK swallowed hard. There are copies. The room froze. Copies of what? Jin asked. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. Everything. Silence. The reports. Another pause, the files. Another pause, the photographs. Another pause, then finally the recording. The room became completely still. How many copies? Suga asked. JUNGKOOK's answer made everyone's stomach drop. I don't know. Nobody spoke, nobody breathed, because suddenly the storage drive felt meaningless. Destroying it wouldn't solve anything, not if duplicates already existed. Not if the stranger had prepared for exactly that possibility. Then JUNGKOOK's phone vibrated. A new message. Everyone looked. JUNGKOOK opened it. His expression immediately changed. What? RM asked. No answer. JUNGKOOK. Slowly, JUNGKOOK turned the screen around. The message contained a location, nothing else, just an address, followed by one sentence. Come alone. The room froze. The stranger had responded. The trade was real. The meeting was happening. You're not going, RM said immediately. I am. No. I am. JUNGKOOK. I'm going. The determination in his voice shocked everyone because despite the injuries, despite the fear, despite everything, he had already made up his mind. Then another message appeared. This one was directed at JIMIN. Everyone saw it. Everyone read it. Bring him if you want the truth. The room fell silent. The stranger had changed the rules again. First he wanted JIMIN alone. Then he wanted JUNGKOOK alone. Now he wanted both of them. Nobody understood why. Nobody understood what game he was playing anymore. Then JIMIN's phone vibrated once more. A final message arrived. Unlike the others, it contained no threats. No countdown, no demands, just one photograph. JIMIN opened it. The moment he saw the image, his entire body went cold. Because it wasn't a document, it wasn't a report. It wasn't an old trainee photo. It was taken tonight. Very recently. The picture showed the hospital room window from outside the building. Someone had taken the photograph from a nearby rooftop. The angle made that obvious. But that wasn't what terrified JIMIN. What terrified him was the detail hidden in the corner of the image. A reflection, small, almost invisible, yet unmistakable. The reflection showed the person taking the photograph, and for the first time that night, JIMIN recognized him. Not the name, not the messages, not the voice, the face. JIMIN had seen that face before, years ago, long before the reports. Long before the stranger, long before any of this started. No! The word escaped before he could stop it. Everyone immediately looked toward him. What? Taehyung asked. JIMIN stared at the photograph, his hands trembling slightly. That's impossible. RM stepped closer. JIMIN, what is it? JIMIN slowly lifted his eyes. His expression had completely changed. Shock, disbelief, fear, and something else, recognition. I know who he is. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Who? RM asked. JIMIN swallowed hard. Then he spoke the name that instantly changed everything they thought they knew about the past, the reports, and the reason JUNGKOOK had been targeted in the first place. And the moment that name left JIMIN's mouth, JUNGKOOK realized the nightmare was only beginning. Min Hyunwoo. The name left JIMIN's mouth so quietly that for a moment nobody reacted, nobody except JUNGKOOK. The second he heard it, every bit of color vanished from his face. RM noticed immediately. So did Jin, so did Suga, because JUNGKOOK wasn't reacting like someone who recognized a stranger. He was reacting like someone who had just heard the name of a ghost. You know him, RM said. It wasn't a question. JUNGKOOK remained silent. JIMIN kept staring at the photograph on his phone. His hands were still shaking slightly. That's impossible, JIMIN whispered again. He shouldn't even be here. Who is he? Taehyung demanded. Jimin finally looked up. His expression remained tense. He was a trainee. The room froze. A trainee, Jin repeated. Jimin nodded slowly. Years ago, nobody interrupted. Before debut, another silence. Long before anyone outside the company knew who we were. RM's expression hardened. And Jimin swallowed. He trained with us. The room immediately became still because that changed everything. This wasn't some random obsessive fan. This wasn't a stranger who had discovered information online. This was someone who had been there, someone who knew things firsthand, someone who knew the people involved. Why have I never heard his name? J-Hope asked quietly. Jimin looked away. Because he disappeared. Nobody liked that answer. What does that mean? Suga asked. Jimin took a deep breath. One day he was there. Another pause. The next day he wasn't. The room remained silent. Nobody explained it. Nobody asked. Taehyung frowned. Jimin laughed bitterly. We were trainees. The answer was enough. Back then, people came and went constantly. Dreams ended overnight. Opportunities vanished without warning. Nobody thought much about it, not at the time. Why is he targeting JUNGKOok? RM asked. Jimin didn't answer immediately, because deep down he already suspected the truth. The same truth he had avoided thinking about for years. Then JUNGKOok finally spoke. Because of me. The room turned toward him instantly. What? Jin asked. JUNGKOok lowered his gaze. Because he blames me. Silence, complete silence. Jimin felt his stomach drop. For what? JUNGKOok laughed softly, a hollow laugh. For debuting. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then slowly, painfully, the missing pieces started falling into place. Years ago, a trainee disappeared. Years later. Confidential reports surfaced. Hidden documents appeared, an obsession grew, a campaign began, and somehow at the center of all of it stood JUNGKOok. The report, Jimin whispered. JUNGKOok nodded. Yes. RM's eyes narrowed. You think he saw it? I know he saw it. Nobody interrupted. JUNGKOok continued. The report listed replacement candidates. Another pause. My name was there. Another pause. His wasn't. The room became silent. And he found out, Suga said quietly. JUNGKOok nodded. Eventually, nobody spoke, because everyone understood how dangerous resentment could become when it had years to grow, years to evolve, years to become something darker, something obsessive. That's insane, Taehyung muttered. JUNGKOok laughed bitterly. I know. You weren't the one making decisions. I know. You didn't remove him. I know. Yet none of that mattered. Not to someone consumed by blame, not to someone searching for a target. Then Jimin remembered something else, something small. Something he hadn't thought about in years. Wait. Everyone looked at him. There was a rumor. The room became still. What rumor? RM asked. Jimin hesitated. Back then, he rubbed his forehead. People used to say Hyunwoo argued with management. Nobody interrupted. A lot. Another silence. And after the report, Jimin stopped. His expression darkened. After the report, he changed. Nobody liked the sound of that. Changed how? Jin asked. Jimin looked toward the floor. Angrier. Another pause, more isolated. Another pause. Obsessed. The word lingered in the room. Obsessed. Suddenly it described everything. The photographs, the tracking, the files, the recording. The years spent collecting information. Then JUNGKOok's phone vibrated again. Another message. Everyone looked. Nobody wanted to, but they did. Slowly. JUNGKOok opened it. The message contained only one sentence. I knew you'd remember me eventually. The room went cold. He was watching. Somehow, somewhere, he was watching. Another message arrived immediately after. The countdown now showed 29 minutes, 28 minutes and 59 seconds. Time was running out. Then a third message appeared. Come to the address. No more games. Jimin stared at the screen, then toward JUNGKOok, then back at the screen. Something had changed inside him. For hours, everyone had been reacting, chasing clues, following threats, being manipulated. But now they finally knew who they were dealing with, and that changed everything. I'm going. The room froze. RM immediately shook his head. No, yes, absolutely not. Jimin didn't look away from the phone. This ends tonight. Not like this. Then how? Jimin snapped. The room fell silent. Nobody had an answer because the truth was obvious. The countdown wouldn't stop. The recording wouldn't disappear. Hyunwoo wouldn't suddenly surrender. Something had to happen. A decision had to be made. Then JUNGKOok surprised everyone. He's right. The room turned toward him. What? Taehyung asked. JUNGKOok looked exhausted. This ends tonight. Silence. You can't be serious. RM stared at him. I am. Another pause. Because if we don't go. JUNGKOok looked toward the timer. He wins. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Jimin stepped closer to JUNGKOok's bed. Their eyes met. Months of misunderstandings. Months of silence. Months of secrets sat between them, yet suddenly none of that mattered. We're doing this together. JUNGKOOK immediately shook his head. No, yes, JIMIN, you don't get to decide that anymore. The room went silent. Because for the first time all night, JUNGKOOK didn't have a response. He simply stared at JIMIN, then slowly lowered his gaze, defeated, not because he disagreed, because deep down he knew JIMIN was right. The countdown continued. 27 minutes. 26. 25. Midnight was getting closer. And somewhere in the city, a man who had spent years waiting for this moment was preparing for the final confrontation. The countdown dropped below 25 minutes. Every second felt louder than the last. Nobody in the room was thinking about sleep anymore. Nobody was thinking about injuries. Nobody was thinking about tomorrow. Everything had narrowed down to one thing: midnight, and the man waiting for them on the other side of the city. RM paced near the window while speaking with security again. Jin was already coordinating with hospital staff. Suga remained unusually quiet, watching everything unfold with sharp eyes. Taehyung looked seconds away from leaving the room himself and finding Hyunwoo alone. J-Hope kept checking the timer every few moments as if hoping it would somehow stop, but it never did. The numbers kept moving. 24 minutes, 23, 22. We need a plan, RM finally said. Nobody argued. Agreed, Jin replied, because walking into a trap isn't a plan. JIMIN sat down beside JUNGKOOK's bed. For a moment neither of them spoke. The noise from the others faded into the background. How bad is it? JIMIN asked quietly. JUNGKOOK knew exactly what he meant. The recording. JIMIN nodded. JUNGKOOK looked away. Bad. That's not an answer. A bitter smile appeared briefly. Then yes. Silence followed. JIMIN folded his arms. Did you lie? No. Did you betray anyone? No. Did you hurt anyone? No. JIMIN frowned. Then why are you acting like the recording will destroy everything? JUNGKOOK didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the timer on his phone. 21 minutes, 20 seconds, 19 seconds. Because some things are easier to hide than explain. The answer only created more questions. What does that mean? JIMIN asked. JUNGKOOK laughed quietly. You'll understand later. JIMIN immediately hated that answer. No, JIMIN, no more later. The frustration finally slipped into his voice. No more secrets, no more half-truths. No more trying to protect everyone by yourself. JUNGKOOK looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment something shifted in his expression, something vulnerable, something tired. I wasn't trying to protect everyone. JIMIN frowned. Then who? The answer came so quietly that only JIMIN heard it. You! JIMIN froze. Neither of them spoke afterward. Across the room, RM suddenly ended his phone call. His expression looked grim. Security traced the address. Everyone immediately turned toward him. And, Taehyung asked, RM crossed his arms. An abandoned warehouse near the harbor. Nobody liked that, not even a little. Of course it is, Jin muttered. Security is moving there now, RM continued. But it'll take time. J-Hope checked the timer. We don't have time. Nobody argued, because he was right. 20 minutes remained, then another notification appeared, this time on Jimin's phone. Everyone heard it, everyone looked. Slowly, Jimin opened the message. A photograph appeared, the warehouse, taken recently. The building looked empty, dark, isolated, but that wasn't the disturbing part. Standing in front of the warehouse entrance was a single figure, Hyunwoo, looking directly into the camera, waiting. Beneath the image were 6 words, tick-tock. Bring the drive. The room fell silent. He's enjoying this, Suga said quietly. Nobody disagreed. Then another message appeared. This one contained a video, 7 seconds long. Jimin pressed play. The video immediately showed a laptop screen, the scheduled upload page, the recording, the countdown, proof that Hyunwoo really could release everything, proof that he wasn't bluffing. Then the video ended. He's forcing our hand, RM said. Exactly, JUNGKOOK replied. Another silence followed. Then Jin looked directly at JUNGKOOK. Question. JUNGKOOK looked up. What happens if we give him the drive? The room became still, because nobody had actually asked that yet. JUNGKOOK thought about it for several seconds, then slowly shook his head. Nothing. What? J-Hope asked. Nothing changes. Everyone frowned. Explain. JUNGKOOK exhaled slowly. Because the drive isn't what he wants anymore. Nobody interrupted. It stopped being about the drive a long time ago. Another pause. Tonight is personal. The room went quiet, because everyone knew he was right. Hyunwoo could have stolen the drive back already if that was his goal. He could have leaked the documents months ago if exposure was his goal. He could have vanished after pushing JUNGKOOK if revenge was his goal. But he hadn't. He stayed. He escalated. He waited, which meant he wanted something else, something bigger. Then Jimin finally understood. He wants you to admit it. Jungkook immediately looked away. That reaction was enough. Admit what? Taehyung asked. Nobody answered, because suddenly Jimin remembered every message, every threat. Every reference to the recording, every attempt to force the truth into the open. Hyunwoo didn't care about information, he cared about confession. The recording, Jimin said quietly, that's why he keeps coming back to it. Silence, because whatever is on there matters to him. Jungkook remained silent, another answer, another confirmation. Then the timer hit 18 minutes. A heavy feeling settled over the room, time was disappearing. Decisions could no longer wait. Finally, RM made up his mind. We're going. Everyone looked at him, all of us. Jin nodded immediately. Agreed. No splitting up. Suga nodded. Good, no heroes. Taehyung looked directly at Jungkook when he said that. Jungkook immediately understood the message. Fine. And nobody goes anywhere alone. RM's voice left no room for argument. Another vibration interrupted them. The timer had reached 15 minutes. 15 minutes until the recording released. 15 minutes until whatever Jungkook had been hiding reached the world. 15 minutes until Hyunwoo got exactly what he wanted. Then suddenly Jungkook stood up. The movement startled everyone. What are you doing? Jin asked immediately. Jungkook ignored him. His ribs clearly hurt. The strain showed across his face, yet he kept moving. Jungkook. Jimin stood too. Sit down. No, you're injured. I know. Then sit down. Jungkook grabbed his jacket. I'm done running. The room fell silent. Because nobody had heard that tone from him all night. There was no fear in it anymore, no hesitation, no uncertainty, only resolve. Then he looked directly at Jimin. If we're ending this, another pause, we end it properly. The countdown continued. 14 minutes, 13, 12, and somewhere at the harbor, Hyunwoo was waiting for them to arrive. The drive sat in Jungkook's hand as they prepared to leave the hospital. Nobody liked the idea. Nobody thought it was safe. Yet the timer continued moving, refusing to give them another option. 12 minutes, 11 minutes, 10 minutes. Every passing second pushed them closer toward the confrontation none of them had wanted. RM coordinated with security teams while walking down the hallway. Jin stayed close to Jungkook in case his injuries worsened. Suga monitored every message that arrived from Hyunwoo. Taehyung kept scanning every corner they passed as if expecting someone to jump out at any moment. J-Hope remained unusually quiet. The atmosphere felt heavier than anything they had experienced together in years. Meanwhile, Jimin walked beside Jungkook. Neither of them spoke, not at first. There were too many unanswered questions between them, too many emotions, too many things left unsaid. Then finally Jimin broke the silence. When were you planning to tell me? Jungkook didn't need clarification. He knew exactly what Jimin meant. The recording, Busan, everything. He stared ahead while answering. Never. Jimin stopped walking for half a second. What? Jungkook laughed bitterly. You asked. And that's your answer. Yes, the honesty hurt more than any lie. Why? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook's expression tightened. Because hearing it from me would be selfish. That doesn't make sense. It does to me. Another silence followed. Jimin hated that answer, yet he could tell Jungkook genuinely believed it. That somehow made it worse. The elevator doors opened. Everyone stepped inside. The countdown reached 9 minutes. Nobody looked comfortable anymore. Then another message arrived. Hyunwoo. Everyone immediately checked their phones. A photograph appeared, the warehouse entrance again. But this time Hyunwoo wasn't alone. The image was dark and grainy, yet one detail stood out. A laptop sat on a table beside him. The upload page was visible on the screen. The countdown matched theirs. Proof, more proof. He's making sure we don't think he's bluffing, RM muttered. Nobody disagreed. Then the elevator doors opened into the parking level. Security vehicles were already waiting. The night air felt colder than before, more dangerous. As everyone moved toward the vehicles, Jungkook suddenly slowed down. Jimin noticed immediately. What? Jungkook didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the drive in his hand, then at the countdown. 8 minutes. 7 minutes and 40 seconds, 7 minutes and 39, finally he spoke. If something goes wrong, Jimin immediately interrupted. No. Jungkook frowned. You don't even know what I was going to say. I know exactly what you were going to say, silence, and the answer is no. For the first time all night, a tiny smile appeared on Jungkook's face. Brief, almost invisible, yet real. You're stubborn. Learned from you. The smile disappeared as quickly as it came. Then everyone got into the vehicles. The drive toward the harbor felt endless despite lasting only minutes. Nobody relaxed. Nobody looked away from their phones. The countdown remained visible on every screen. 6 minutes, 5 minutes, 4, then another message arrived. This time there was no image attached, just text, one sentence. The truth always survives. Nobody liked it. Nobody understood it completely either, yet something about the wording felt deliberate, as if Hyunwoo no longer cared whether they came, as if he already believed he had won. Then the warehouse finally appeared, dark, silent, standing alone near the edge of the harbor. Security vehicles surrounded the area at a distance. Flashing lights reflected against metal walls, yet somehow the building still felt isolated, untouched, waiting. The countdown hit 3 minutes. Nobody spoke as they exited the vehicles. Nobody needed to. The tension said everything. Then they saw him. Hyunwoo, standing exactly where the photographs showed, exactly where he promised he would be, hands in his pockets, calm, patient, waiting. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He simply watched them approach. "Stay behind me," RM said immediately. Nobody listened, especially not JIMIN, because the moment he saw Hyunwoo's face clearly, old memories resurfaced. Years-old memories, training rooms, practice sessions, long nights, dreams, ambitions, failures. A young man who once wanted the same future they did. Yet somewhere along the way, something broke, something twisted. And now they were here, facing the result. "Hello, JIMIN." Hyunwoo's voice sounded exactly like it had outside the hospital room. Calm, controlled, almost friendly. JIMIN didn't answer. "Hello, JUNGKOOK." JUNGKOOK's jaw tightened. Still no answer. Hyunwoo smiled slightly. "It's been a long time." "End this," RM said immediately. Hyunwoo glanced toward him. "I intend to." Then his eyes returned to JUNGKOOK. The smile vanished. "Did you bring it?" JUNGKOOK slowly raised the drive. Hyunwoo nodded. "Good." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The countdown reached 2 minutes. Then Hyunwoo pointed toward the laptop sitting on a nearby table. The upload page remained active. The recording was still scheduled. 1 minute and 53 seconds, 1 minute and 52, 1 minute and 51. "Delete it," Jin said sharply. Hyunwoo laughed softly. "Why?" Nobody liked that answer. "Because this ends tonight." Hyunwoo's expression darkened slightly. "No," the single word echoed through the night. "This started years ago." Silence followed. "Long before tonight." Another pause. "Long before Busan." Another pause. "Long before the reports." The tension intensified immediately. Then Hyunwoo looked directly at JIMIN. "You still don't understand, do you?" JIMIN frowned. "Understand what?" Hyunwoo smiled again, a sad smile this time. "The recording was never my weapon." The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even JUNGKOOK looked confused. "What?" Taehyung asked. Hyunwoo slowly pointed toward JUNGKOOK. "He was." The countdown dropped below 90 seconds. And for the first time that night, Hyunwoo looked less interested in revenge and more interested in something far more dangerous. The truth. The harbor fell silent. Nobody moved. Nobody even looked at the countdown anymore, because every eye was fixed on Hyunwoo, fixed on the man who had spent years chasing a moment like this. "What are you talking about?" RM demanded. Hyunwoo didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked directly at JUNGKOOK. "Tell him." JUNGKOOK's expression tightened. "No, tell him. No." The tension became unbearable. JIMIN stepped forward. "JUNGKOOK." Silence. "Tell me." For a moment, it looked like JUNGKOOK might refuse again, like he might keep carrying the burden alone, like he might spend another year, another decade, protecting everyone except himself. Then something changed. Maybe it was the countdown, maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was JIMIN standing there refusing to leave. Whatever it was, the wall finally cracked. JUNGKOOK looked directly at JIMIN. "The recording isn't dangerous because of what it exposes." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. "Dangerous because it's true." The countdown continued. 60 seconds, 59, 58. JIMIN stared at him. "What truth?" JUNGKOOK swallowed hard, then he laughed softly, the kind of laugh people make when they stop running. "The truth that every decision I made." His voice shook slightly. "Every fight." Another pause. "Every sacrifice." Another pause. "Every stupid mistake." He looked directly at JIMIN. "Started because losing you scared me more than losing anything else." Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Hyunwoo looked surprised, because that wasn't a confession forced out by blackmail. It wasn't dragged out by threats. It wasn't revealed by a recording. JUNGKOOK chose to say it himself. JIMIN stood frozen. The harbor lights reflected across the water behind them. The countdown continued falling. 45 seconds, 44, 43. "JUNGKOOK," JIMIN whispered. JUNGKOOK shook his head. "No." His eyes were red now. "You deserve the truth." Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared. Busan happened because I couldn't stand hearing someone talk about you like that. Another pause. The hospital happened because I tried to protect information about you. Another pause. Everything happened because I thought keeping you safe mattered more than what happened to me. The silence that followed felt endless. Then JIMIN stepped forward, one step, then another, until he stood directly in front of JUNGKOok. You idiot. JUNGKOok laughed weakly. Yeah, you absolute idiot. Another laugh. Probably. JIMIN shook his head. You should have told me. I know. A long time ago. I know. Then for the first time all night, JIMIN smiled, small, emotional, exhausted, but real. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. JUNGKOok stared at him. The words hit harder than any threat, harder than any secret, harder than any recording, because they were exactly what he had needed to hear all along. Behind them, the countdown reached 20 seconds, then 19, then 18. Hyunwoo looked at the laptop screen, then back at the two of them. His expression slowly changed. The anger that had fueled him for years seemed to fade, not completely, but enough. Because the confrontation he spent years building toward wasn't happening the way he imagined. The truth wasn't destroying them. It was bringing them back together. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. Nobody moved. 6, 5, 4. Hyunwoo looked at the upload screen. 3, 2, 1. Then he reached forward and closed the laptop. The timer vanished. The upload stopped. Complete silence followed. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. Finally, Hyunwoo laughed, not happily, not bitterly, just tired. Maybe I lost this one. Nobody answered. Security moved in moments later. The nightmare was over. The files were recovered. The recordings were secured. The years of obsession finally came to an end. But some truths leave scars even after the danger disappears. Hours later, as the sun began rising over the city, JIMIN and JUNGKOok stood alone outside the hospital entrance. The chaos was gone. The reporters hadn't arrived yet. The others were inside handling the aftermath. For the first time in months, there were no secrets left between them, or at least that's what JIMIN believed. Then JUNGKOok suddenly looked away, a tiny movement, almost invisible, yet JIMIN noticed it immediately. What? JUNGKOok hesitated. Nothing. JIMIN narrowed his eyes. JUNGKOok. Another pause. Then JUNGKOok reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. One final document, one final secret. JIMIN frowned. What's that? JUNGKOok stared at it for several seconds before answering. Something Hyunwoo never got. JIMIN felt his stomach tighten. What is it? JUNGKOok slowly unfolded the page. His expression changed instantly. Shock, confusion, disbelief. JUNGKOok, no answer. What's wrong? Slowly, JUNGKOok lifted his eyes. This isn't possible. The morning wind moved between them. The paper trembled slightly in JUNGKOok's hand. Then he revealed the sentence written across the top of the page. A sentence that proved Hyunwoo hadn't been the first person investigating them. A sentence that suggested someone else had been watching from the shadows long before any of this began. And as JIMIN read the name written beneath it, he realized the real story had only just begun. The nightmare ended at midnight, but the person behind the first secret was still out there.